Good afternoon. We are back in session here for the Planning, Housing, and Parks Committee. Today we are taking up the Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission operating budget. We have three separate items, all somewhat related, on our agenda. I want to welcome the chair of the Planning Board and welcome members of the Planning Commission and members and directors of the Parks and the Planning departments, and welcome Ms. Dunn from our staff who has done a great job with this packet. And I will turn it to you, Ms. Dunn, to walk us through. We have a number of discussion and decision points based on what you have put forward, and then I have shared with colleagues based on discussions, a lot of ongoing work in the planning department of some items for consideration once we get through the packet. With that, Ms. Dunn, I will turn it to you.
Great, thank you, and good afternoon. Before we start, I just want to note that on the packet I had as an expected attendee Justine Jones from OMB, but instead we have Ms. Alicia Singh here with us today, and I didn't want that to not be noted, so she's here from OMB to help us. So with that, we're going to get into the staff report for today's operating budget for the Commission. The first two pages are really the high-level summary. I'm not going to spend time on them because we're going to really get into the details so that you understand all the components of the operating budget that are going to be recommended for the full council. And the first thing before we get into the talking about the Park Fund and then the Administration Fund is a basic overview of the M-NCPPC budget. And that budget includes tax-supported funds, there are self-supported funds, there's debt service, and there are reserves. The tax-supported funds for the administration and the Park Fund, those two funds represent the lion's share of the operating budget, and as it's presented in this packet. In the FY25, the proposed tax-supported operating budget, including debt service, is $188.1 million, and this represents an increase of about $17 million, or 10.2%, over the adopted FY24 tax-supported budget. The Administration Fund, for the Administration Fund, which funds the Central Administrative Services, the Commissioner's Office, and the Planning Department, the County Executive has recommended a budget that is $2.7 million below the Commission's request. For the Park Fund, the CE's recommended budget is approximately $4 million below the Commission's request. In total, non-tax supported operating budget items total about $22.5 million, and this is up 6.9% over FY24. As you have already been reviewing other operating budgets, and the Council President sits on this committee, you're aware of the Council President's approach to the budget, but I'll repeat it for people who are just tuning in for the first time to listen to an operating budget work session. The CE's approach is a modified version of last year's process that automatically places certain tax-supported increases on a new and enhanced programs list, while also creating a framework to identify potential reductions to the base budget. For M-NCPPC, the significant reductions are required already to meet the CE's budget. The following review that you will go through today will evaluate reductions necessary to meet the CE's budget, concentrating on budget changes from FY24 to 25 that increase one-time or ongoing funding, and whether something is a new or enhanced program or service or a new position. You'll see a table that highlights all the changes for the two funds, for grants, for self-supporting funds on the fourth page of the staff report. That's just a high-level accounting of everything that's being changed or requested from the adopted FY24 budget. One thing we also cover when we're talking about the M-NCPPC budget are the spending affordability guidelines as they are applied to M-NCPPC. For the upcoming budget year, the Council approved FY25 spending affordability guidelines for the Commission of $175.6 million. This is up from $160.1 million that was approved before, and this new amount is about $1 million below what the Commission has requested. The spending affordability guidelines adopted by the Council don't place a limit on the amount that the Council can approve in May for this budget, but it does create some procedural requirements if it exceeds it. And on the middle of the page, on page 5, you'll just see an accounting of what's included in the spending affordability guideline budget numbers. And with that, we'll turn to the major changes in the FY25 budget for the Commission as a whole. Significant FY25 changes for M-NCPPC are covered in the chair's letter, which are part of the staff report, the largest of which is personnel cost changes in FY25. Those are proposed to total approximately $10.5 million. Non-personnel cost changes total approximately $3.4 million, and funding for new initiatives comes in at about $3.5 million. But it becomes more important to talk about these as each fund, because then the details for what's being funded can be reviewed by the committee. But in general, on page 6 of the staff report, you'll see an accounting of the adopted FY24 base budget and all the things that are changes to it proposed in FY25 for the commission as a whole. With that, we will go into looking at more specifically the park fund. The Parks has requested an FY25 tax-supported funding of $134.9 million. This excludes grants, debt service, and reserves, and represents an $11.5 million or 9.3% increase over FY24 approved budget. And that's just summarized for you at the top of page 7 of the staff report. The changes from FY24 to 25 are also on page 7. And you can see that a review of the increases from 24 to 25 will occur with us looking at some of the non-recommended reductions to meet the CE budget, and again, the new and enhanced program list changes. But in general, the changes for the budget include compensation adjustments, known operating commitments, OBI, which is operating budget impacts for CIP projects. NPDES is the National Pollution Discharge Elimination System. There's also money for funding new program enhancements and critical needs, debt service on general obligation bonds, and other post-benefit employments, pay-go, and pre-funding. So that's totaled for you on the bottom of page 7. And as you can see, there are sections that highlight each of those things that are increasing the budget from 24 to 25 and their percentage of that increase. Compensation adjustments account for about 52%. Known operating commitments about 19.8%. Our operating budget impacts come in at only 2.7% of the requested increase for 25. The National Pollution Discharge Elimination System mandate is only 1.2% of the budget increase. Debt service and obligation bonds is 6.2%. And program enhancements comes in at about 12.7%. In staffing, there's a total of 17 new positions included in the FY25 proposed budget. 5 of these positions have a net zero impact on the budget. As noted, 2 of these are noted on the page before, and they fulfill an operating budget impact for new and expanded park facilities. With respect to salary lapse, at the request of the council, the department increased its budgetary lapse from 9% to 10% during the FY24 budget review process, and has done a lot to fulfill those positions and reduce what is their effective lapse rate lower than it has been. And there are no new fee increases for FY25. Are there any questions on those big picture items? Next, where we're going to get into is reductions that the Planning Board has put forward after discussion with Parks and Park staff related to meeting the county executive's budget.
Yeah, might I suggest before we get into the reductions and start talking about decision points, I'd like to turn it over to Chair Harris and the directors just to speak to their budgets, and then we can get into the cuts that they are putting forward as non-recommended cuts in reductions in order to make this more manageable, and then some of the decision points of what we may add and how. That works for colleagues.
Okay.
Mr. Harris?
So, yeah, I'll just make a general overall opening remarks. So we appreciate being here today. The Commissioner's Office, the Central Administrative Services, Planning and Parks all pride ourselves in our operational excellence and attention to equity and accessibility throughout all our policies and programs. We're an amazing return on the Council's investment overall, representing less than 3% of the combined county's budget, but supporting over 37,000 acres of parks and providing master and sector planning and other studies for the whole county. However, the county's executive recommended budget is not even a same services budget for us, and without Tier 1 restorations, at a minimum of all departments, we risk service cuts throughout the commission. We're your department. We work directly with the council, and we look forward to your continued partnership and commitment to ensuring we have the financial resources we need to complete the work and maintain our operational excellence. Our work is so important, as you you have seen in making the county a great place to live, work, and play for all residents throughout all the county. So we look forward to reviewing our budget with you this afternoon, and I'll turn it over to Jason quickly to do his piece, and then we'll, because my commission office is such a small piece, when we get to that, I will just make a couple of comments there, okay?
Great. Thank you, Chair Harris, and thank you, President Friedson. I also want to take a quick moment to thank Ms. Dunn. She did a really comprehensive review of our budget requests and really gave thoughtful consideration to the items that we had on it, and we always appreciate working with her and, of course, with the council. So I just want to start by saying, some of the things I've been talking to you all about a lot recently. It's a new day at Montgomery Planning. We have new leadership, a new vision, a new enthusiasm to implement our new general plan, and a renewed partnership with the County Council. And although this budget wasn't prepared under my leadership, I do believe that it accurately represents the staffing needs and supports the robust work program that the department needs to be taken on for FY25. I would say also we're quite the efficient department. You are very familiar with the tremendous amount of work that we do on master plans, on development reviews, studies, data analysis, placemaking efforts, legislative support and analysis, housing, transportation, equity, and environmental programs and initiatives. We do a lot of that, again, hand in hand with you all. And not just the three of you on the committee, but all 11 council members and many of the other committees as well. We bring great value to communities across the county and are a consistent and reliable resource for the council and for community members. Yet our budget represents less than 0.4% of the county executive's recommended operating budget. Our department's request for FY25 is an 8.5% increase, but with the savings and alternative sources of funding that we've been able to find, we've been able to reduce our request by $315,000, such that we're only asking for a 7.2% increase now. I don't want to dwell too much on the county executive's recommended budget. In fact, I really appreciate and respect that the council's approach to this has been that they're not assuming the county executive's budget as the starting point, but rather taking a fresh look at each agency's request. Nevertheless, I wanted to highlight one last thing before we dive into the details. The planning department needed to identify $1 million in reductions to meet the county executive's budget. Similarly, if you restore all of our requests that council staff has identified as Tier 1, that actually would put us with a $1,006,000 reduction from our request. So it's just slightly higher than what we would have to do to meet the county executive's request. And so it's essentially the same. So of course, I hope that you can restore our entire 7.2% request, but also understand the difficult decisions that you're going to need to make. And I hope that you recognize the value we bring to the county, and by funding us with what you believe is an appropriate and deserving parity with other county agencies.
Thank you, Council President Friedson and members of the committee. We know that you have a hard job this cycle, especially given the expiration of one-time pandemic-era funding, and that presents an extra challenge for you. I will say, before I say anything else, I do want to mention that I have with me here to my right Shuchi Vera. She's the Division Chief for Management Services. You are all familiar with Andy Frank. He's Division Chief for PDD. He oversees the capital budget, and Shuchi Vera oversees the operating budget. So I asked her to come here today so she can answer any questions that perhaps I can't answer. So as the chair said, our department comprises only 2% of the county's overall operating budget. And with those funds, we manage 37,000 acres of land, 419 parks. We serve over 1 million residents who have a very diverse array of parks-related needs. And we believe that the ROI on this investment is, as he said, very significant. And I think that, the council has heard that and is aware, and we appreciate the council's support. And as the committee acknowledged when it reviewed the rec department's budget, parks and recreation are central to people's feelings of health and well-being. We think that parks make people healthy and happy. And we're still seeing extremely high visitation in our parks, and we're so happy about that. Hundreds of people are attending, thousands of people are attending our programs and events and visiting our parks, but that has an impact That means trash to take out, grass to cut, equipment to fix, programs to keep running. And so this year, obviously, when we made our budget request, we were mindful that we needed to obviously ask for what it takes to just keep what we have going. But in addition to that, we asked for a modest $1.5 million increase for program enhancements that are all designed to serve the needs of this growing and changing community. And those, some of those, which I think we'll get into, but they include positions that would improve customer service, grow our activation program, improve outreach to hard-to-reach communities, enable us to seek more outside, non-county tax-supported funding, and improve the efficiency of our parks operations. As Jason said, I don't want to dwell too much on the county executive's proposed budget, but it did result in the Parks Department having to identify $4.2 million in non-recommended reductions. Right off the bat, we worked really hard to identify about $2 million in reductions that we can take without affecting our delivery of services. I will add, we don't pad our budget with the expectation that then we're going to have to make a reduction, but we are sometimes able to identify certain reductions that we can take, for example, prepaying certain expenses, reducing our debt service. We lapsed a number of our program enhancements for 4 months in order to, try to meet at least part way what we know we're going to have to find, and that leaves only about $2 million left. About $1 million of that would take us back to a same services budget, and the remainder includes some of the program enhancements that we are ready to discuss with you today and that we hope to see some funding restored for.
Mr. Chair, if I can make one more comment about the CAS so we don't have to
Sure, please.
The CAS is our Central Administrative Services. That's the backbone of our work. They handle all payroll, benefits, labor relations, procurement, payment processing, retirement benefits, and more. And without them, the Planning Board and Parks and Planning wouldn't be able to do their work. They're the backbone of our organization. And I have Acting Executive Director Bill Spencer and our new Budget Director Terry Charles here to answer specific questions. But one of the pieces that I want to bring forth is that in our budget request, we were asking for money around positions for our ERP, our Enterprise Resource Planning System, and that's in desperate need of an update. CAS has started the process, but funding at the CE's recommended level would delay this project past its life cycle of the system. So we can talk about that later, but this system handles all payroll, benefits, performance evaluations, check requests, purchase orders, and payments. And it's again about operational excellence. It's coming to the end of its life. By having a modern system, it's going to help us move contracts faster for things like capital projects so that it can reduce time for procurement and get projects done faster. We said we're all about operational excellence. It'll also make it easier for vendors to register and do business with us, which will also help us with our supplier diversity and small business initiatives that we can talk about later. So I wanted to, right now, the CAS, through this procurement process, in the first half of the fiscal year 24, they processed $65 million of goods and activities through this older system, and in 2023 they processed $140 million in goods and services. So I'm just saying it's important to have, through our purchasing and procurement process, which ERP also facilitates, to have a faster, more easily working system that would help us facilitate and make our work faster. So I just wanted to bring that in there. And then one last piece is that in our recommended Tier 1, Ms. Dunn agreed with 4 of the 6. 2, we weren't specific enough, but 2 of them are state and federal mandated positions, an ADA coordinator position and a supplier diversity position that are required. They're not like we would like to have, but they're required positions. So I want to put that on the table as we go through those items. Okay. So thank you so much for this additional information providing.
Great. Okay. Thank you. let's turn it back to Ms. Dunn. Let's go through the packet.
Great, thank you. So we're on page 9 of the staff report, and we're getting to the section where we usually talk about reductions to meet the executive recommended funding level, and we're in the Parks Fund still at this point. And to meet the executive recommended funding level, the department has allocated reductions to their fund, and it's for the amount of $4,183,547. Typically, when the amount of reduction that's needed for the commission comes over, the commission will prorate or share some of those cost burdens and reallocate it across Parks, Planning, and CAS in the Commissioner's Office. So the Parks Department has identified this required reduction and grouped them into 3 tiers. And as you can see, the first tier is at the bottom of page 9, and that would be the tier that they would first obviously prioritize being restored. And it consists of contractual increases to meet the department's obligations to sustain current levels of services at existing parks and facilities, inflationary increases to sustain current levels of service at existing parks and facilities, and operating budget impacts for new and expanded parks, which are basically 2 positions that are needed for CIP improvements that have already been approved. And then you'll see the next 2 tiers, Tier 2 and Tier 3. Those are containing almost all new positions and just a handful of new initiatives related to research for the PROS plan implementation. There's also an herb-free weed control initiative funding amount in there. That's a new initiative as well. And then you'll see at the bottom of page 10, the reductions in savings submitted by parks that they've already mentioned would be to either defer funding on certain positions, and as you heard Ms. Farag mention, one is the reduced funding for the park police maintenance cost because that project's not ready to move forward. And so that total would be around a little over $2 million. Following the chair's suggestion that new and improved programs, new and enhanced programs and new positions be placed on a list with such a title, that would seem to place the things that are in Tier 2 and Tier 3 on that list. And that staff suggests that the committee support the restoration of Tier 1. What would be added to that is the $12,000 that you've already talked about the park police contract. That's sort of to replace that $200,000 reduction that they've offered because the contract is being delayed, but they need the $12,000. And it would be the assistant bar manager position would be added to Tier 1. And with that, we can turn it over for discussion.
Sounds good. So we have a recommendation from the staff here, which I appreciate, the idea being that the Tier 1 items are not new programs, it's maintenance of existing programs. Tiers 2 and 3 really are new enhanced programs, and so those would be on the new and enhanced programs list. Need to see if colleagues have any comments. Councilmember Flannagan-Gonzalez.
Can you clarify, Chair Harris, did you say, maybe I misunderstood, that there is something on Tier 2 or 3 that it's on, that is a match with a federal grant or any other grant or state grant? Did I? That's the planning. Okay.
That's important.
That's in planning. Got it. But would that be in Tier 1?
For planning, yes.
Okay, perfect. There you go. The only one that is actually in Tier 2 and 3 that I have, that I'm concerned, and I think we need to restore, is actually under Tier 3, and it's number 3, the nature and outdoor programming for seniors. And I'm saying it because, our senior population is going up, and the needs are huge. I've been to many of the events that Parks and Planning have done with seniors, and I feel that this is something that we need to, that we cannot just oversee. And so I will prioritize that one, the number 3 under Tier 3.
Appreciate that. So I also agree that's an important, many of these are important. I'll just note, so the options would be, we could move around the items in tier 2 and tier 3 and keep them as blocks, and have our own prioritization if we want to usurp the prioritization of the department. That's within our authority. We could decide whether or not that's a good idea or a bad idea, but I just want to, offer that up as an option if, for instance, if you wanted to move that from tier 3 into tier 2. The other option would be to line item these and not have them tiered. The challenge of that would be that it wouldn't provide colleagues with an understanding of the department's priorities and give, the level of deference that we have frequently given to the implementers to provide their own expertise into what is most important and most interested. So I want to put that out there to colleagues to see what the thoughts were. I can turn it over to the director to see if she has any comments or thoughts on that, and then I'll turn it over to Councilmember Jawanda. Is it okay if I turn it to the director first?
So these are our non-recommended reductions. We have offered up to the planning board and to the council how we would prioritize these, but you are correct. We want all of these positions. They're all important, and it is within your prerogative and entirely fine and appropriate for you to take a look at these positions and make judgments about what strikes you as most important to prioritize. They're all important to us. That's why we asked for them, and that's why we would like to get as many of them back as we can, as you're able to do. So I just wanted to make that, statement. Yeah.
Great. Thank you. So essentially, as it currently stands, as is being proposed before us, there are 2 tiers for the new enhanced programs list that's being proposed, 5 positions and essentially 2 initiatives in each. So the question is, do we want to leave it as is? Do we want to make changes? Do we want to include only some, include all, move them around, into 3 to 2 or 2 to 3 or vice versa? Councilmember Jawanda.
Thank you. Just wanted to discuss the tier 1 items a little bit. Every year we go through a different process in whether it's reconciliation list or new and enhanced, and I was just in an HHS E&C meeting where we were talking about school nurses and other things, and I think there's going to be some, like there always is, some gray area in what is new and what is needed to continued service, and we're going to obviously have to figure all that out. But in these, so contractual increases to meet the department's obligations to sustain the current level of services at existing parks and facilities. I just wanted, for each of these, could you just explain what that means in the context of this request, so people understand?
Sure. So I'll start off with the contractual increases. So this is basically to keep as Director Figueredo mentioned, our entire tier 1 is really to keep our parks operations running as is without any enhancement. So keeping the lights on, making sure we can pay our utilities, our fuel for our vehicles, portable toilets, which is more important than I think it sounds, but restrooms are very important to our residents when they go to our parks. So we're really talking about basic services. We're also talking athletic field lighting repairs. Athletic field lighting is a major issue right now because you get more play when you have lighting.
But let me just pause you for a second. So,
okay.
For example, lighting repair makes sense. The lights are there. You got to replace the bulbs.
Right.
Is this to maintain the current porta potties or to add additional ones for expanded service? You know what I mean? There's a difference between those two things. We love them. We love porta potties, but
we have existing contracts, and they have in them increases in cost over time. So we are required to make those payments. It's not optional for us. So once we make those payments, if we don't get the funding for them, something else has to give.
Okay. And just pausing again.
Yes.
OMB. I know it's a tough position. That seems to me that would not be something that would be requested to be cut. And are you factoring that in? Because we go through this every year with the Parks Department in particular. I understand on new positions and on the other items, if you don't executive doesn't think they're priorities, that's fine. But like on things where it's like, we have a contractual obligation, did you all factor that into your analysis and then the county executive's recommendation?
We don't see this level of detail when the CE makes the recommendation. The parks essentially develop how they want to do those cuts, or reductions, rather.
Yeah, but when the CE is making his recommendation on a funding level,
No.
you're not looking into that level of, there's not
No.
that level of communication.
Correct. No.
Okay, I would just ask again that there be that level of communication. You know, and again, if I don't expect everyone to agree, it's fine for the executive to put his perspective forward and say, I want it to be less. But I just think for things like this, we should, you know, there should be an understanding. So if you could take that back, I know you didn't make the decision. All right, please, so on the inflationary increases, I think I understand number one. For the one that carries the FTEs, like number 3, so let's talk about the new and, is that just, what's in that? Operating budget impacts for new and expanded parks?
Yeah, so that's all of our CIP projects that we expect to open in fiscal year '25. So whether it's new parks, which we're doing less of actually, but expanding parks, renovating parks, there is an operating budget impact, meaning that there is going to be additional costs to run those parks and those extra amenities. The OBI also includes things like, even when we're just renovating parks, there are new regulations. So as soon as we touch a new park or we touch a park, we have to upgrade stormwater management, which adds money. We have to maintain those stormwater management facilities. We have to add ADA amenities, which also cost money to maintain. So I'll just give you a couple of examples of parks that are opening in fiscal year 25. Oh, and Pam's directed me to where they're listed. I'll just name a couple that might resonate with you. So Caroline Freeland Urban Park. We also have Valleywood Neighborhood Park. 10 Mile Creek Conservation Park, the White Flint Civic Green. We have a lot of parks that are opening, whether they're renovations or new parks.
And the 2 FTEs would be?
Oh, that would be in response to, so we're going to need additional
Like maintenance.
people to maintain
Right.
those parks.
Got it.
And some of that is going to be seasonal funding, and some of that's going to be career.
Okay. I appreciate that. Thank you. I just think it's important for people to hear that and understand how those are different from like things you might want to go past and do more, which we all want to do in the entire budget. But these, you know, so I think these things do seem like they are listed as things that have to happen just to maintain current level of service for parks that we've built. We certainly want to build something and not maintain it, right? So, so I would just say I'm in agreement on that. I do. As my E&C hat and other hats, I worry about adding too much to the list. I also, I do agree with the council president's point about tiering. It is good to tier based on your information, because when it gets on that list, I think having some guidance is good, but, you know, I'm open to that conversation.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. Thank you for fleshing that out. I think it's a really important point that you have elevated here. I appreciate staff, because a lot of these conversations occurred to try to have fidelity with this approach, which I think is an important approach to differentiate decisions we've already made and the costs of those decisions, as we dealt with previously in the Department of Housing and Community Affairs. We've made a number of recent decisions. Regardless of how one might feel about those decisions, those decisions come with costs. Some of them come with positions to carry out with fidelity, and that shouldn't be treated the same as a new decision to make a new enhancement or a new program or hire a new position, which would be a new priority of ours. We should follow through on the commitments and the decisions that we've already made. So thank you. I really do appreciate that. So we'll agree with the staff recommendation. Let's start there. Let's discard the things we can discard. It sounds like there's full agreement with the staff recommendation that restoring Tier 1 as suggested. And let's move on to Tier 2 and Tier 3. It sounds like, I just want to make sure I'm paraphrasing correctly, Councilmember Giwando is comfortable with the tiering as presented in the blocks as presented, which is how we've traditionally done it. Yeah. Councilmember Fani Gonzalez noted the one position she feels really strongly about in moving it up to Tier 2. I'd be comfortable and fine with that? Are you fine moving that one
I'm
item?
fine moving it up, it just, the big decision is what we do with what we.
Sure,
Yeah.
agreed, there's no guarantees that
Happy to
those,
move it.
yeah, so in deference to that and in agreement with that, we're going to move number 3 on Tier 3 as the 8th item on Tier 2, and then we're going to move those in blocks as, Tier 2, restoring funding for Tier 2 with the reflective amount of that change, moving the $168,208 as a larger Tier 2, and then a Tier 3 subtracting that $168,208.
And the only thing I'll note is that, given the conversation with the joint committee, that second item on Tier 2 is going to be out of there, and so it actually will just be the 7th item. It'll be a new 7
Yes.
under Tier 2.
Perfect. So we were going to have to change that anyway. Good point. Thank you for
We'll redo all that.
reminding us of that. We'll reflect that. So
Okay. Got
Ms.
it.
Dunn has full understanding. There's comfort level from the Parks Department on that. Okay, so we have a recommendation on the parks aspect of this budget.
And just to be clear, it'll be recommending restoration in these 3 tier categories.
Well,
Well,
Tier
it's-
1 would be essentially in the base budget. It would not be on the new and
not-
enhanced
yeah, so-
program.
Tier,
so-
yeah, Tier 1 is a
Tier 2 and
restoration.
3 would be
The new and enhanced
new and
programs.
enhanced in their tiered.
Right.
Yes.
It'd be a block of funding
block of
to say
funding.
restore tier,
The items in Tier 2 at this amount, the items in Tier 3 at this
yeah, I would suggest we just restore the funding of the items and call Tier 2, Tier 1, and call Tier
Yeah,
3,
yeah.
Tier 2, because I think it'd
Yeah,
be
yeah.
confusing
No, we'll
on a
do that when I get it
reconciliation
on
list
the
if there is no
list.
Tier 1.
Yes,
Does that make sense?
yeah.
Well, that was why I was asking.
Yeah, no, I think it's a good point.
It is.
Because tier
will
1 is
change
now
it.
no longer there.
We'll do
It's
it,
in the
yes.
base, so now, which is almost, it's $900,000, so it's not nothing.
Right.
But,
Yeah.
and then Tier 1, now the new Tier 1 would be the 600,000, right? And then
Or
Tier,
Yeah.
give or take.
Right.
And then Tier 2 would be the current Tier 3.
Right.
And what you're proposing, I just want to make sure, is that we would restore those, put those on all of those items on the list, is that what you're saying?
On the new and enhanced programs.
Yes.
As a block, as opposed to individually.
That's, yeah, I mean, that's a decision point of the committee. I think there's an argument to be made either way. It would not prioritize, if you put them on individually, there's no prioritization.
No, I
So
agree.
colleagues would be voting on those individually, essentially picking off the menu. The idea of tiering them is that you give that level of deference to the department to share what they think are the most important and impactful, even though all of them are important. That's why they've
Can I
suggested
ask
moving
this?
forward. Sure.
Within Tier 2, did you ranked those obviously within the tier, right? So 1 being most important. They're all important, we know that. We love all our children. But, okay. So I just want to recognize that, as a committee member, I always want to give you as much as we can, but realizing the challenges of the budget, that if I see a block of 600,000 and a block of 685, that's tough when going against everything else. So I just, if the number 1 is 138,000, the additional funding for park activation, I think that's that's super important. Like, if we took the barn manager off because in the last session, so that one's gone. It might make sense. The data analyst seemed like it probably really important. The customer service, to put those top 3, absent the park, on there. If you really want to get, I'm just saying, because I don't know how I'll vote, even if it, when the list comes around. I'm just saying, and I'm supportive generally. It just depends on the other priorities. So, as the council president said, there's pros and cons of that. So I don't know if you want to speak to that list anymore, or just let it stand as is.
The list represents our recommendation about the priority order of these program enhancements we defer to the committee as to how you want
Got
to
it.
handle recommending them for the new and enhanced.
So the options before us really are whether to keep them as tiers, a modified tier 1 and a modified tier 2 for the new and enhanced program list, or whether splitting them up, is something that there is interest in the committee to do. I mean, that's really the decision.
Yeah. I mean,
the decision point
I
here.
think I lean towards splitting up just because it's so many items.
You could note under each title that one is tier 1 and one is tier 2,
Well, I think we will call it tier 1 and tier 2.
Right, and list out.
We mean like when it's on the
Yeah,
list.
the individual title would be the additional event, funding for this park, maintenance worker, funding for services dash tier 1. To indicate.
Oh, I think
to
the question
full
is whether or
council.
not you're saying do it line item by line item and put parentheses tier 1,
And then tier 2 for the other.
as opposed to doing it
line
as a
item.
block.
That might be good because then at least you give some you solve that question, that problem, but deal with my concern too.
I see, I'm so sorry, can I jump in?
Yeah,
Please.
I
go
see,
ahead.
why not, Natalie? I see it the opposite. I see people be inclined to say, I'm going to pick 2 from this list and move on to everything else in other departments. I'm actually extremely concerned if we do that. I'd rather have it as a block and be like, this is what park needs, 1 and 2, tier 1 and tier 2, and move on. But don't break it down, because then I think this is going to be worse for them. And remind people, it's such a small fraction what Parks and Planning is getting out of the entire county budget. And I don't know, I'm preaching to the choir here. I know you get this. But this is about quality of life and making sure we attract more people living in Montgomery County, having those beautiful parks and trails. It's not just a narrative, it's crucial. So I would say we need to keep the block, tier 1 and tier 2, modified as we explained, and that's it, because otherwise it's going to be, people might cut this in half. I don't trust, I don't want to say I don't trust my college, but it's just like, it could happen.
Well, it still could, or you could lose all of it too.
I think people would at least pick 1 tier, honestly.
All
I
right.
think.
I'd like to thread the needle here a little bit among colleagues, if I can. We made a decision before to move the 168. That's a huge chunk of funding into the higher tier. Would you be willing to do the tiers if we move that back into tier 3? Because just to see if we can thread the needle on this, I agree with you and share your interest in that position, but I also understand where Councilmember Jawando is coming from, that it's a big number, and that would actually reduce the modified tier 1, because we have, the
It would be more
49,000.
like 550.
It might be
Yeah.
66,000.
And we're taking, because we just,
949.
Yeah,
she had proposed adding 168,000. That becomes a much bigger number. It becomes, basically like $718,000 for tier 1, which to your point is a big number.
It's not a big number.
Yeah. I
Would
mean,
you
so-
be more inclined, I'm
Yeah,
asking an honest question. If you would be more
How
inclined
is
to do
that
that, I'd be
represented, Ms. Dunn? How would that be represented on the list? Because council members are still going to ask, well, what is this in this block? I mean, it's not like it's going to go away. It's like we make the decision today and then it disappears. But so the idea would be represented as tier 1 with all these as one line item on the list. And if a council member had wanted to ask what tier 1 was, they would see these items. Is that right?
I don't know, honestly, that central staff has gotten to that level of detail on what the list will actually look like.
What's the intention?
Well, I can tell you one of the things that has been discussed, and we're figuring out exactly how to operationalize, is making sure that between council members and chiefs and their staffs, there's a full understanding of what every line item on the new and enhanced
That would be good.
programs
Yeah,
list entails, because for those who weren't part of the full breadth of committee conversations, or there's just a lot being thrown at different aspects of the budget. So my hope, my expectation, without having all the details of exactly how this will ultimately be done and the timing of that, would be that it would be very clear of what the exact aspects of what's in each tier would be. So
Got it. I
if that helps
That
to
does
enlighten
help.
your
What's
decision.
the lease of high-volume mowers? And why is that in tier 1?
So We have a number of mowers that are reaching the end of their lifespan and need to be replaced. And our analysis has shown that actually leasing mowers as opposed to buying new ones and repairing them is much more cost effective. So that's what this request is for. We're going to need the mowers, and we just think this is
a pilot project, though.
Yeah, yes, we are trying out, we're piloting the leasing of the mowers. And our analysis is that it will actually be less expensive over the long term to lease them.
It's a pilot for cost savings.
Exactly,
down the road.
not for mowers, but for the.
No, I see what you're saying. Okay, I definitely, if we move, I'm more comfortable if you move it down. I was thinking if we could move that one down too. To tier 2.
How concerning is that to the department?
It's the last one on the list. I tried.
So I'll just add a little bit more detail to what Director Figueredo said, which is it is an efficiency project, but it does have a little bit of impact on the operation. So right now we're finding it very difficult to even buy these big mowers to take care of our 36,000 acres or 37,000 acres of land. And it's the last time we bought a few, it took almost a year to get them. There's a lot of, as you can imagine, supply and logistics issues right now. So this is a very innovative way of getting them when we need them. And not only that, but getting them repaired when we need them, because the downtime for the repairs for these large mowers can run for months. And then, you're not getting the nice athletic fields cut in time and things like that. And you really see those impacts.
All right, I'm going to make
so I just wanted to expand on that a little
I
bit more.
appreciate that. I'm going to make a suggestion to try to bring this in for a landing. I would suggest that we move down, as discussed before, the prior item that we had moved up where it originally was, move the lease of high-volume mowers out of the modified Tier 1, so we would be eliminating lease of high-volume mowers, pilot project, and the barn manager, which we've already talked about, so that would reduce that. Put that in as a block, as a tier for restoration of funding, but at a more manageable number. And then the remaining ones include as line items.
Noting that they're tier 2.
The remaining items, including the lease of high-volume mowers.
Which is on both lists there.
Yeah, I was going to point out that if you move the lease of high-volume mower pilot project money in Tier 1 down to the second one, I think you've almost eliminated the ability to do it if you don't fund Tier 2.
Well, he was saying put them in as line items, so you could just take the Tier 1 money and put it as a line item in Tier 2 and eliminate that Tier 3 money for it, which would looks like it's extra money. You split it in thirds or 2/3 and 1/3, something like that.
Yeah. What can you do with the 98,000 that you can't do with the 65,270?
Just less.
So the 98,000 would allow us to lease 3 mowers. And then the
65
additional
would be 2
65
more.
would be 2 more.
2 more, okay.
Yeah.
I think.
So it's scalable.
Just get rid of it.
Yeah, all right. So we're going to replace the item 7, the lease of high-volume mowers, that 97,909. That becomes the number. We're only going to have one line item. My suggestion is removing that and the assistant barn manager, creating a new Tier 1 for the, Tier 1 restoration of parks funding at a smaller number that's.
Be more like 375.
Exactly, which is a more manageable number in a block. And then the rest, we just line item out, and we list them, and then in parentheses, as council staff suggested, we note that those were Tier 2 options, and that way council members can determine, what their issue is. Some council members will want to restore all of that. Some will want to restore some, maybe some not at all. But ultimately, we'll be able to make those decisions.
I'm fine with that.
Is that good?
Yeah.
Yes. Unfortunately, central staff is a little confused.
Okay.
Are you restoring with the other Tier 1 restorations, the high-volume mower pilot project?
Let me see if I can repeat it. That means I'll understand
Okay.
it.
Good.
So my understanding is that current, it says Tier 2, but we're going to keep everything, the assistant barn is out because we dealt with that last time. So the rest of the items will stay except for the lease of high-volume motors, which will move down into Tier 3. The current Tier 3 8 will be removed, and we're just going to put one line item for lease of high-volume mowers pilot project at 97,909 as a single item along with the rest of the items in Tier 3, and note that they're Tier 2. So the block will, and then the block that we just will be items from Tier 2, 1, 3, 4, 5, and 6 will become the new block of Tier 1.
Correct.
Was that clear, and was that worse?
No, I understand. I guess I'm just concerned that then there's likely, if only Tier 1, the new Tier 1 is restored off of the new program list, there's no funding for the high-volume mowers.
Well, it would have to be selected by 6 council members. So we're giving it a shot, but we're taking it off to reduce the block number. That's the compromise we're talking about.
And I assume you said it would be the 97,909, but I think it would be both amounts, or you,
No, I think
so the rest of that would go under like a reduction in savings, you're just not
Yes.
requesting that amount? Okay.
Correct.
I get it.
so you can do a
So we have
pilot
the
with 3,
numbers to
just
make
not
sense.
5.
Okay.
You could toe in the water, or 2 toes in the water.
Okay.
3.
3.
Everything but the big toe and the pinky toe.
Yeah.
Okay, is that, I mean, we're trying as hard as we can here to, put the Parks Department in as good a position as possible to get as much consensus here as we can. I'll note, I've worked very hard over the course of the last 5 years. This current committee, the previous iteration of this committee, has worked exceptionally hard over the last several years to restore funding. This is an issue, as was noted by Councilmember Jawando, as has been described and discussed by Councilmember Fonda Gonzalez. Every year, we deal with the same dynamic and the same issue here, where the public loves access to the parks. It's a huge quality of life, wellness, health issue for our community. And every year, the council tries to step in and make sure that we're providing as much funding as we can. So we're keeping that tradition, and we're trying as hard as we can, but there are always competing dynamics, so we're trying to put our best foot forward here and make sure that we're putting ourselves in the strongest position possible. And I think it's strongest to have consensus from the committee going into the full council to put us in the best position moving forward. So sounds like we have consensus. I appreciate this. Is a really thoughtful discussion. Council staff's comfortable now? Perfect. Let's continue on with the packet.
Great, thank you very much. If you'll turn to page 11 of the staff report, there are 3 funds: the Property Management Fund, Enterprise Fund, and ALARF, which is Advanced Land Acquisition Revolving Fund. And the budget for these amounts is before the committee and the council every year. They are part of the operating budget. But we don't typically review them in a sense that we start to make changes to them. They are estimates of how much revenue they think will come in and how much expenditures will need to be made in these funds. All that information from the Parks and the Planning Board are on pages 11 and 12 of the packet. At the end of the day, for the Enterprise Fund, there is still a total of $1.6 million in their revolving fund at the balance, and central staff doesn't see any concerns with any of the numbers that were presented in these sections. I'm happy to talk about any of these or to review them individually, but since we don't typically make recommendations to change them, I'm also happy to move on to the administration fund.
Unless there's any comments or questions from colleagues, let's continue.
Okay. So on the bottom of page 13, moving to the administration fund, this, as I mentioned earlier, it funds the Bi-County Central Administrative Services, the Commissioner's Office, and the Planning Department. M-NCPPC's total tax-supported budget request for the administration fund for FY25 is just over $45 million. Represents a more than $5 million increase, and that's 12.9% over FY24 adopted budget. The executive recommends a little over $42 million, which is about $2.7 million below the commission's request, and $2.5 million above the FY24 adopted budget. If you'll turn to top of page 14, you'll see those numbers laid out with the details for the Commissioner's Office, Planning Department, CAS, and some non-departmental accounts. Moving to the Commissioner's Office, I'll explain it for a minute, and then I know I want to turn to the chair, who also wanted to still make a few comments about the chair's office. But if you'll see on page 14, the chair's office, the budget request for FY25 is almost $1.5 million. This is about a $200,000 increase from the FY24 budget. This is primarily due to an increase in other services and charges, and those are delineated a little bit more for you in the middle of that page. Their share of reductions to meet the executive's budget is about $150,000. And they have recommended them into tiers. You'll see that at the bottom of page 14 and at the top of page 15. But you'll also see that the reductions have to do with delaying of hiring. And again, this gets back to the council president's direction to put new programs, new enhancements, and new positions on this list. So delay in hiring doesn't really achieve that. And I could go further into what council staff is suggesting, but before I do that, I want to turn to Chair Harris.
Yeah, thank you so much. So, as you know, we have a permanent board in place, chair and 4 new board members, and we're also working on some really key projects that create a lot of attention from the public and from others, and we're out there, we're more engaged, and we need the best messaging we can to move those projects forward, like attainable housing and other things like that. As the chair and the commissioners, we're out there more in the public. I'm lobbying on behalf of the commission at state and other events and other levels of a lot of this legislation that went on. So we need proactive support, not reactive, to get our projects moving forward. So that's why we had recommended, they also, before my time, they recommended the public affairs position last year and didn't get it. But we need that and some strategic communications support to get our messages out there, to address public concerns, and so we can move our projects forward. This has been done through the planning department, but the planning department needs more communication services themselves, so we need more in the so therefore, we need that kind of support in the commissioner's office. We also need this. We hire a consultant for some communications management, but we need more than that. I understand that this is a tough budget year, and Ms. Dunn had put in some more consulting time, one off than having an ongoing person, but over time we would like to put out there that we need dedicated person sooner than later to support the commission's office. And then some of it is just in more detail. So we talked about strategic communications. We're looking at that as weekly check-ins in the commissioner's office to provide strategic communications, marketing, counsel, and support on critical matters in front of and affecting the board, on web and social media content coordination. Supports needed is on social media best practices, and develop an editorial calendar to curate the commission's office, on press and earned media support. Public messaging support is needed to prepare and respond to media inquiries. And this includes talking points, media interviews, scheduling, preparation support, and responses for crisis communications, and then thought leadership as we're moving key agenda items forward. That's speech writing and storytelling support for major public events, and help reestablish the board's brand. So I understand, and given what's going on, the budget deficits, Ms. Dunn had recommended at least some communication support that we use as consultants, but sooner than later we would like to have some support in the commissioner's office, given all the agendas we're moving forward. So that's...
Appreciate that. So council staff has recommended adding on the new and enhanced programs list, either in one tranche or two, the $100,000 strategic communication support and the $116,524 for the new public affairs specialist. I personally don't think we need to do these as tiers or like individual items. I think the question would be whether the $100,000, whether there's interest in putting on the new and enhanced programs list. If that is something that colleagues are interested in, I think it's worthwhile personally. I think we need to be doing more communication from the Park and Planning Commission and Commissioner on down. We're hearing that from the community for a lot of different reasons. We'll get to that on the planning side specifically in a moment. So the question would be, one, do we want to put it on? Two, do we want to tier it or just put it on as individual items? I personally think individual items are fine. There's only 2 or 3 items here, and whether or not the 100,000 should be, if it is being included, split up into 2, since for contracting, you could split that up into a smaller number. Let me turn it to Ms. Dunn, and then I'll turn it to colleagues.
Sorry, I just want to make one clarification. So if you look at the amounts for the strategic communication support contract, it's $100,000, and the new public affairs specialist is a little over $116,000. The commissioner's office share of reductions was only $150,000. So you could leave to meet the CE's budget, to not go over the CE's budget. You could cut just up to $150,000, meaning you could put, I had suggested putting the public affairs specialist on the new and enhanced list because it would be an ongoing charge, and we're talking about trying to address sustainable budgetary conditions in this year and in the next year. And if you didn't want to restore the total strategic communication support contract, because then you would be taking on, a higher cost than even the CE's recommended budget, you could fund some of that contract and still meet the CE's budget.
Thank you for that. Councilmember Fani Gonzalez.
I feel strongly, there's no way I'm going to support this. The planning board's job is not to get a PR specialist. If we want to move and educate communities about planning and parks, that money goes to the planning department and the parks department, not PR, strategic, what's it called again? The public affairs specialist for the planning board. This is an independent board that, I was on the planning board and we didn't have that, and I don't think we should have that. And if I didn't think that before, I definitely don't think that now. So the only thing that I would support under Tier 1 is that interim position, just because that's part of developing new folks. But anything else, it's a no for me.
Councilmember Girondo.
Yay, I get to be the deciding vote. And no, I normally am the other way around. I'm fighting uphill. I appreciate the chair's rationale. I know we met about this. My concern is, currently, and we had kind of like a speed dating meeting when we talked about this. I didn't get to ask any questions. It wasn't your fault. It was my time. You're currently using the planning or parks comms folks, right, when you want to communicate stuff. Mostly planning, I guess it sounds like. But I know Parks has really good. I'm always impressed with your comms, by the way, at Park and Planning. So that doesn't.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I'm always excited. I know when I go to a Parks event, there's going to be a nice setup, and there's going to be a good picture, and it's going to work well. And then I'm going to see the picture in a deck later when you come back. So but. In all seriousness, they have a very robust operation that you all direct them. So it's hard for me to justify this in this type of budget year when they do have a robust. So maybe if you want to, I'll give you opportunity to speak to the strains on the respective agencies and how you exactly think, why you think this is so needed. But so I wanted to let you respond.
So what I said, I understand it's a tough budget year, and we're willing to potentially defer this conversation on the public affairs special, but we do need, whether it's in our budget or the planning budget, I mean, they support us. I mean, I'm out there 2 to 3 times a week. I'm out giving, either talking to folks or in legislative meetings, and some of this is very technical, some of the things. So someone is working with my chief of staff preparing speeches. And at this time where planning is also working with their communications department, they're pushing out their things. So I think some money in the strategic communications consultant should be, additional money should be in someone's budget, right?
Well, you just help me understand, because when you say they, I mean, you all are one entity. I mean, you're the management structure for the park and planning, and so if their staff is preparing you, that's what should be happening. Like, I mean, I just feel like that's the role.
But I'm saying,
but help me understand the strain on the system.
Yeah,
I guess.
but they are over. I mean, Jason can speak to this. Their communications department is along with what they have to produce for the board, is at capacity, at overcapacity. And you would-
Sure. I would say that where this is really kind of the biggest pinch point for us is there are press releases that come out from the chair's office that aren't from the planning department that we'll work on and preparing. There's social media. We actually right now don't have any social media handles for the board, and so whenever something goes out or whenever someone tags something that happened at a board meeting, they tag us or they tag the Parks Department, which sometimes it's related, but sometimes it's not. It's, and their website, they have a separate website than what we have. We have our own website for the Planning Department, a separate website for the Parks Department, a separate website for the chair's office, too, the commissioner's office.
Okay. I think we need to defer this. I don't know if all that's, again, the board is making decisions for park and planning. The decisions are related to park and planning, right? So I just think, like, to the extent that you're creating a press release, it's to describe something related to planning. It's not, or parks. It's not some other topic, So again, I think I agree with the former planning board member that we can come back and talk about this, but given where we are in the budget, I don't think we should add it on the list.
Okay, well, essentially, it's failing for lack of a second. Appreciate the thoughtfulness of the discussion here. So we are not going to support putting those on the new and enhanced programs list. I tried, but I think it's understandable where colleagues are coming. We've got a lot to prioritize in the park and planning budget. I hope that we will strongly support those efforts, and there's a couple other items that will be taking up that are related to the outreach piece, which are particularly important to me, and I hope and think that there would be shared interest in learning more about and moving forward about. So with that, let's continue.
Thank you. I just wanted to circle back to Councilmember Fanny Gonzalez's comment about the seasonal intern in that office. Do you want to have that on the new and enhanced program list? I had not included it in mine because both of these were such large ticket items, but there is a very small
For the
amount of money.
$7,536, would you like to put on $7,536 for the internship program?
Sure.
Okay, we'll add
I'll go on that.
$7,536 for the seasonal intern position.
Agreed.
Can't say you didn't get anything here, Mr. Chair.
You get that? Interns are important,
You walk out of here with coupons.
especially on social media.
Yeah. You're walking out of this committee with coupons for your office, but you're walking out of this committee with something.
And that's
right.
on the new and enhanced list or restored?
New and enhanced lit.
Okay.
Well, there's an existing position, intern position? Has it not? It hasn't been funded previously? Okay. Let's add it to the new and enhanced program list to be consistent.
Okay. Thank you. All right, we're going to turn to page 16 now, our overview of the planning department. And if you'll see on page 16, you have, there are actually 10, I have a typo in the staff report, there are 10 divisions in the planning department, and the funding that was adopted in FY24 and the FY25 request and the percent change associated with each of those divisions is listed on page 16, and you'll see that the top receivers of the request for FY25 are the Director's Office, Countywide Planning, Management Services, and then fourth is Communications, with the planning divisions lower than that, around the middle of the page. If you turn to the following page, page 17, the page number printed. This is again a high-level summary of the changes from FY24 to 25 for the planning department. It provides you with the FY24 adopted base budget, changes for FY25 that are considered base budget changes, new initiatives that are one-time, and again, new initiatives that are ongoing. And you can see that the total amount of new initiative funding is about $1.3 million. And the total budget request then is a little over $26 million for new changes, new things altogether from FY24. The planning department has proposed 156 positions, which is 155.8 work years before lapse and chargebacks for FY25. This represents an increase of 5 new positions and 5 work years plus 1 work year and funding for a currently unfunded position. And after chargebacks, the grand total for the department would be about an additional 5.25 work years over what was approved in FY24. And then there's just a note in the staff report, which is that the analysis that you see within the section on the planning department and the analysis of the work program, they're highly tied then to the budget because you have funding for master plan support and funding for positions that all support the ongoing work of the department. We have a master plan schedule that was presented at the semi-annual. You'll see that on the bottom of page 18 is the new work program items being proposed. You have the Bethesda Downtown Minor Master Plan Amendment, Friendship Heights Sector Plan, and the Georgia Avenue Corridor Plan. And then you have multiple studies, some of which were proposed initially in FY24 and unfunded, and one new one. And if you turn the page, you will see what's coming to the council. These are the master plan work program delivery schedule. You have received already the Fairland and Briggs Cheney Master Plan, Tacoma Park Minor Master Plan. And very soon here we'll be receiving the Great Seneca Plan, Connecting Life and Science. And then in FY25, as soon as we get into the next fiscal year, you'll be receiving the Growth and Infrastructure Policy Update, a University Boulevard Corridor Plan. If added, the new Bethesda Minor Master Plan Amendment, Clarksburg Master Plan Amendment, Silver Spring Communities Master Plan, and then in FY26, 2 new plans, the Friendship Heights Sector Plan, and then slightly beyond 26, the Georgia Avenue Corridor Plan. Before we get into talking about things to fund and reductions to take, the committee may want to take a moment, and the planning department might want to weigh in. If there are any known adjustments to the timing of any of these things, the work program chart that was presented at the semi-annual is also included in the resolution for the budget and the operating budget of the planning department. Doesn't mean it can't have changes made to it and delays can occur, but we like to try to be as accurate as we can when we produce that for the resolution. So if there's any changes that the planning department knows of for any of the things that have been listed on that work program chart, or if the committee wants to ask any questions about any additional work program items that they might want to see added, now would be the time.
Please.
The only thing that I would, and I don't have an exact date on this, but the Innovative Housing Toolkit, which shows a delivery of May of this year, will not be. We're waiting on the consultant to get back its final set of responses to our comments on that project, and so that will probably be later in this year. At this point, though, we don't have any other changes to any of the other items.
Okay, but that wouldn't have an impact on the staff recommendation. Clarification, but no impact on the staff recommendation. Okay, so staff has approached this in a similar way to say the things that we have in the work program that are already moving forward, we have to pay for the costs of doing that work, some of which requires consulting services and other things to carry out master plans and other dynamics. So that is what staff has suggested be tier 1 and to restore as we did previously. So I just want to start with that and make sure that there is agreement and understanding of the rationale behind that recommendation, and whether or not there is agreement with that. Let me turn to colleagues. Councilmember Jawanda.
Yeah, if Ms. Dunn, could you just explain where we're on page what?
In the staff report, we were reviewing the work program. If there's no changes to that.
Yeah, fine with the work program.
Right. There was a lot of information on the new positions being requested and the new initiatives. It's there really so that you understand what's being asked for and the amount of money associated with them. If we move to how to get to the reductions and what goes on the new and enhanced list, we're at the bottom of page 23, where the title is Reductions to Meet the Executive Recommended Funding Level. And as the chair just mentioned, the planning department has proposed 2 tiers of reduction and a tier of offered savings. But if you look at the new positions being requested, there are 6 new full-time positions, one that was not one conversion from a part-time to a full-time.
Yeah.
It would total more than what is, it would total $643,000. And if you add all the new professional service fundings, it totals, I think, $682,000. So what council staff is suggesting, looking at the list, what they have on Tier 1 are the Georgia Avenue Studies Consultant Services, Friendship Heights, Sector Plan Consultant Services. Those do support ongoing work for plans that if this body says, yes, they are the plans we want to see coming forward, those consultant and professional services are very important. They provide funding to do specific and targeted outreach. They provide very technical transportation modeling assistance for the master plans for APFO reasons. They really support the ongoing work of the commission for those master plans. The Tier 2 items have, again, other studies, but you'll also see some reductions taken in here for delaying of hiring of new positions. But really can't take a savings on hiring new positions when body has decided that new positions will be put on a new and enhanced list. So it's not really a savings if you don't have the position. So if you turn to the next page, you'll see what council staff suggested is actually a larger Tier 1. It incorporates the Georgia Avenue study, the Friendship Heights study. It notes that in their savings, they can pre-fund a parking lot design study as part of the Safe Streets federal grant that they received, but there are matching funds associated with it. So council staff's included those in Tier 1 because they will need those to access that grant. But then you will see a number of positions added. And the reason for this is that there are 3 regulatory positions being requested by the planning department, and they've had a large uptick in the number of applications that they've been processing and reviewing. It is a fundamental core of what they do in addition to master planning is their regulatory review. And we don't talk about it enough. Sometimes we don't see it because we don't see it on the master plan list. So we forget sometimes that that's a huge part of their work program. But those, if you were to meet the code deadlines for review of applications, if you're to provide the same service that they do today, but you have more applications coming in, you need staff there to process and to review those applications and to move things forward. So I see it more as a continuity of service. If you are currently reviewing 400 applications and you know that in this fiscal year and in the next that's gone up to over 500, then you need staff there to support it. So I've suggested they go into Tier 1. And part of the benefit of that as well is that there's a development review special revenue fund, so there's charges made for applicants when they come in, and that partially offsets these salaries. So you will see that as the new Tier 1, and then leaving in Tier 2 some of the professional services that were requested and also noted as Tier 2 by the planning department, and then the remainder of the new positions put on Tier 3 since they aren't new and need to be put on the list.
Okay, thank you for the explanation. I think I heard the chair saying they wanted to treat some of these things like we treated I want to make sure I heard it correctly, the maintenance of the new parks, for example. Were you suggesting that these not go on the new and enhanced list?
That's the same.
Yeah, I just that's hard to do. Again, being in other committees and joint committees that aren't taking that approach for things that are very similar, like, we've said we're going to have enough nurses and there's more kids getting sick, and so they need more positions, but those are new positions. It's not. So I just think it's hard it creates an uneven playing field vis-a-vis other really, really important things in the budget. And these are all important, I'm not saying they're not, but to put them on, but to try to not have them be on the list and have to stand on their own is not going to be equitable in the context of what's happening in other committees. And there's always some of that just because of the nature of we're all different people and we do things different ways in different committees, and it's different central staff and it's different agencies, so it's always going to happen a little bit. The other thing is so that's one issue I have with doing that. The second is on the consultants. This is something that we've talked about over the years. We do. Park and Planning has a very robust team. I know we could all want more, but you guys are really good. A lot of them are sitting in the back here, and I know you use consultant services regularly. The question of how much that is needed and to what extent, and to say that counts as like doing the work, like if you have a plan, there must be a line item for $100,000 or whatever for a consultant. I don't know if there's universal agreement on whether that should be the case. And so that would be my other, regardless of whether, substantively, whether I agree with that or not. I think it's probably, sometimes I do, sometimes I don't, but that will be my other issue with including it as a, we already said we're going to do this plan, and it necessitates a $200,000 consultant or $150,000 consultant. Go ahead, Mr. Story.
Sure. So I think to a certain extent, I mean, we're really dependent on these funds coming through for these plans to be put on our work program. We cannot do the Georgia Avenue plan or the Friendship Heights plan to the extent that you expect without getting this funding to do the outreach, to do the analysis, utility analysis that we have with Georgia Avenue. These are things that we don't necessarily have the expertise in-house. Or we just don't have the sheer number of people to be able to do it. We'd have to get our entire staff to go out and do the canvassing, for a series of days. And so in order to be able to do this, that's when we bring in the help for like a short period of time. One thing I try to kind of liken this to is a lot of times, well, first I will say that compared to a lot of other planning departments across the country and certainly locally, we do have the capacity to take on a lot ourselves, and we do. There are a lot of places that are completely dependent on bringing in consultants to have that capacity. But the one thing I try to compare this to is, when we have a project, like say it's a bridge project in a CIP, and that gets put into the CIP for MCDOT to work on, and there's planning, design, and construction, the Department of Transportation has a lot of people that do transportation work. They've got planners, they've got engineers, but they still outsource the work on a lot of that planning work and a lot of the design work. It's all being done by consultants that they bring in, and it's just kind of seen as planning and design.
Right.
And so in some ways this is similar for us to be able to do, to take a look at certain types of alternative options for design features for Georgia Avenue. We want to bring in a consultant that has that expertise to be able to give that to us, to be able to then we bring that to the community. So it's kind of a back and forth with the consultant.
Well, one of the things, I appreciate that, and like I said, I'm not in the camp of like I know you use the consultants well and you produce a good product. I think outside of budget, suggestion to my fellow committee members is that we come back and look at this issue just more holistically, because I know there's things with Georgia Avenue that you do in-house. There's things that you're going to do with consultants, right? And like having a better understanding of what that is and what that means in a plan like that, I think would be helpful, at least to me as a committee member and someone who's been on this committee going on 6 years. I don't have a full understanding of that. And if it is need to be baked in, then I think to your point, that'll, I think, help us going forward. So my reaction would be, I would like these things listed as new items, because I just think it's hard to not count them as that. So
Appreciate your point. I'm very sensitive to the up-county planning supervisor, planner intake. I mean, I do. They're critically important, and they are part of the core services. I totally understand where council staff is coming from. I also understand your point of we're not doing that when there are more health and human services needs as well. So I think that's a very legitimate point. I do slightly disagree, however, on the consulting services for master plan implementation. And the reason for that is only in planning, uniquely to any other department, any other budget, do we look at the consulting services, for instance, to implement core government services as a new item every year. Because the consulting services are slightly different each year, but we used consulting services last year for the master plans that we implemented in the years before. And actually last year, the consulting services were gutted, and that held up projects, literally held up projects because, and added delays. So I hear what you're saying. I think you're right, and I'm sensitive to that, and you've kind of convinced me on this, to be honest, on the positions, even though I'm a staunch advocate for them, and I will fight to support them. But I do think the position should be added to the new and enhanced program list. I do think the consulting services, because the planning department will be placed at a deficit every single year, because what we really should do is just have a line item for consulting services to implement master plans, and you should just borrow from that. The challenge that they have is, we set the work plan. They want to show that they're following through with what we asked for their work plan to be and targeting the funding. So I don't think it's really fair to say, we want you to fulfill this work plan, we want you to do this master plan on this timeline, and say, but we're going to consider the funding to actually do what we told you to do as an enhancement and a new program that you're suggesting to us. So anyway, that I'd love to hear feedback on that, but I do hear what you're saying. And my only other question would be on the 0.8 to 1. If you could just explain that, of whether or not that's more of the going from part-time to full-time because there's a higher workload, or if there's some other reason for that, because we may view that differently based on your response to that.
Yeah. So I will. This is actually a position that we asked for last year. It was the only position that made it out onto the reconciliation list, and then it was cut at reconciliation. So we didn't get any new positions last year. This was the last one to hold on. And what we ended up doing was, this was an important need. We had someone who had been in that role. Actually, I had been in that role as a term contract employer back in 2016.
Luckily, you kept moving up.
Yes. So there are opportunities here that can be made. But so the person in that role had been in it for 4 years and as a term, and we don't like to keep terms. We say, this is actually a need that we have. We need to fill this. And so we asked for it. We didn't get it. So what we ended up doing was we found we had an unfilled, a vacant part-time position that we said we're going to repurpose, and we used it for this. And so this person's been filling this role. This person runs our entire, is working on leading up the school's effort for the growth and infrastructure policy. She does the annual school test, which she's in the process of doing. She also does the annual school utilization report. She's someone who, at this moment, I'm pretty confident is working well beyond her 40 hours a week right now. To make sure that everything gets done on time. And so this is just, it's a full-time position. It's also overseeing the review when every development application comes in, it needs to be reviewed against the annual school test. She oversees that effort too. So it's a nonstop with this position. And so I fully support this being in the resource, an existing position, just making it full-time.
All right, that seems like less of a new and enhancement to me. I think if we are going to move in the approach that I'm trying to suggest here, of moving the new positions into a new and enhanced programs list, I'd suggest, this is an encumbered position, I'd suggest that we include that in the base. Let me yield to Councilmember Jawanda and then Councilmember Funny.
So I appreciate the discussion and the point that you made. Last year, we did include consulting services as line items, right?
But yes, but we've slightly changed the approach. Last year, we also included following through on federal and state requirements.
Was on there,
we included inflationary increases. We included literally anything that was added above the last year's budget. We added to reconciliation list. The approach this year is that doesn't seem reasonable to include continuing the services that we have that cost more money.
No, I get that
with
approach.
A new program, a new implementation, the new positions to better meet the needs of residents. It might not, at the very least, is an enhancement. I think to service. I get your point on that. I understand where staff is coming from. I'm very sensitive to that. But I hear what you're saying, and I'm trying to be respectful of that and make sure that we're being as consistent as possible based on what you have raised here. But the contractual services are different because it's only because of the way in which they're set up, where they treat master plans as point in time, even though it's part of their ongoing work. That's the only reason why we would be treating it that way. And to not provide funding for that is to literally not allow the planning department to function in its core government service that we have asked them to fulfill, in namely their work program that we approve.
Yeah, and I think ultimately, to your point, I think I heard you made that, or I think maybe you made it, Mr. Sartori, that instead of saying Georgia Avenue Corridor Plan Professional Services, it should say Georgia Avenue Corridor Plan. Like either we're it's like, if you don't provide this money, if that's where it is, that we can't do it, right? You know, whether or not we approve the work plan, you know, this is something that, it sounds like what I hear you saying is that without these professional services, you couldn't do the work, you couldn't do the Georgia Avenue plan?
Yeah, we would delay it. We anticipate this one beginning in the middle of FY25, so it would be delayed 6 months, assuming that we would get the funding in FY26. So
Right.
yes.
Right. Yeah, and then to the point that Council President said about, like, there should be just a pot of professional services, and I still want to come back and dig into that, but I think that's reasonable to say that we need to pull from this account to do our various master plans.
And I can tell you, too, that for the $155,000 that we're asking for there, you know, we have this broken down. We know that we're looking for $75,000 to do the transportation modeling scenarios that I talked about, having those different design understandings, alternatives. The public utility analysis at $50,000, and then $30,000 for engagement materials, translation services, and everything that goes along with that. So, you know, we do get it, and it's in our proposal,
Yeah.
but you can see we go into detail.
I know
on
you're
what
not
it's
just
all for.
winging it.
No,
I know. I wouldn't. And again, all these things are important. So if I understand Chair Friedson's point, yeah, if we pull the positions out, I could go along with putting the other things in a tier 1 or in the service
Restoration, and then we would, and then we'll get to
Yeah.
new enhanced program list.
Yeah.
Does that work? Okay.
Yeah, can I just?
Councilmember Finding Gonzalez.
I agree with what it has been said. I just want to emphasize, since we're talking about Georgia Avenue, I cannot hold myself. Perfect timing. We're getting bus-only lanes on Georgia Avenue during this summer. The state committed to analyze how this is going to affect metro and buses. Perfect timing for planning to come in and do their analysis. And hopefully one day achieve the dream of making Georgia Avenue a boulevard where people can walk, bike, take transit, and ride. So yes,
We'll quote that in the plan.
yes.
Here, here. I'll second it. You can add all of our names to it because we all agree, and that is the vision that we all share for that. I appreciate that. So just to clarify, to make sure we're all on the same page, we're going to take the salaries offset by the chargeback, the $204,641. We'll include the $23,584, which is really to an existing encumbered position, very different. The $155,000, the $50,000, and the $30,000, and that will be restored. And then now we're going to discuss the new and enhanced program list to include all the new positions, plus the mapping segregation phase 2 and the burial sites.
Just for clarification, that salaries offset, that's actually goes hand in hand with those 3 positions. Those are basically 53% of those positions, and it varies for each one of them, is covered actually from the Development Review Special Revenue Fund, the revenue that we get from development applications. So that would have to stay with those 3 positions.
Okay, so the question then would be, if we included let's hear you on that. So ignore my point on the 204,641, and we'll discuss that right now, or right in a second. Is there agreement otherwise, an understanding of what we're restoring? Okay, great. All right. So settled on that. Thank you, colleagues. Thank you to council staff and to the department for thoughtfulness here. All right, let's talk about the 3 positions in the 204,641. If we were to, and it sounds like there's agreement to include it on the new and enhanced program list, but that it is an enhanced service to meet the growing needs of the Up County and the growing needs of development review. How would we reflect, like, do you divide the 204,641 proportionally amongst the 3 positions so it makes those numbers smaller? Or are you going to take that anyway? Like, just help me understand that.
And it's I think it's there's one that's at 90%, one that's at 70%, one that's at 30% covered by, and I could have those numbers wrong, but basically those are the portions of these positions that are covered. So the intake position, that is, I think, the 90% one, 90% of that salary is covered by the Development Review Special Revenue Fund, and then the other 2, it's the smaller share is probably the supervisor, and then the The 50% is the planner one. So the case I want to make here is I understand where we are with putting all new positions into the new and enhanced list. I would hope that we could put this at the top of that list of the tier 1. I know the numbers are changing but for us because this is really vital for us just to be able to continue to provide the services that we're providing. Right now, our up-county team and our intake and regulatory coordination team are pulling people from other divisions to help out. And those other divisions are at a certain point saying, you can't keep taking our people. We're also pulling people from other functions, so people who do master plans. Our forest conservation inspectors are helping out with some of the forest conservation plan reviews. So we're pulling people from other places to try to make this work. Having these people allow us not only to continue to respond to the number of applications we're getting, but also try to do it in an expedited way that everyone wants us to be able to review these on a quicker basis. So.
Well, speaking for myself, I'm very much supportive of this. We'll work as hard as I can to move it forward should it get on the list. It sounds like there's support to do that. I just want to make sure I'm understanding, because is the 163,000, 316,000, and the 111,176, is that the amount of money that you would need net the 204,641? Okay, so a number on the new enhanced program list should reflect the net. Just because that's the budget impact to us, that is the decision point before us. So the actual cost of these, on that list will be smaller. That's better. That puts you stronger in the game, so to speak. So I just want to note that. So if we could update that to make sure it's reflected as the line item itself, I think that would be helpful. If we were doing it as a tranche, it wouldn't really matter. Right. But since we're not doing it as a tranche, it may be different. Although here's the question: given how we have the same question before us now in these positions, do we want to treat these positions separately as line items, or do we want to include these? I would be comfortable, given what we have done, to include these 3 positions together as a tier 1, since this, given the importance to and the impact that it has, and then include the other items, any other items that we want to include as separate line items that colleagues can vote on. Sure.
So you said the up-county supervisor, that's a 75%?
I believe that one was the 30%.
30%.
Yeah, 30%.
Okay.
The up-county planner 1 was 50%.
Okay.
And the intake and regulatory coordination planner 1 is 90%.
So that one's intake and regulatory coordination planner 1 is going to happen. That's because you've got 90% of the 111 already funded through your development review fees, right? Is it, or fund?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Is that right?
Yeah.
So the other one is looking like it's around 120 or 117,000, something like that. The first one, if you take 30% of 163,316 is 48,994. So whatever 163 minus 48,000, that's what the number would be there. Yeah. So
115.
115-ish. Then you said the other one was 50%.
50%.
So that would be
so it's like 55, 56,000.
55,000. Then the last one would be more like 90, or you'd only be like
11,000.
11,000, right? Okay.
Am I wrong to think, just on the math, if you added all of them up and subtracted 204,641, you would get a number, and that's the total number. That's 181,027. Just to make the math easier for everybody.
There you go.
These 3 positions together, and I think we should note that there is saving. This is with salary offsets, including salary offsets. I think it's a compelling case with the state working group that we have supported their work and to address the issues, but keep consistent with the other committees as they've had.
And I do personally like keeping them together as a group, because if the intake, if our intake team is pushing these out faster, they're just pushing them out faster to the up-county team that can't, doesn't have the staff to be able to receive them. So if we can,
it's a chain, and you don't want to have a break in the chain.
In this sense, it makes sense to keep them all together as one item. I did just want to go back to the the countywide planning, Planner 3, that the 23,000, just explain to me that again. I know we had previously said we were going to not have that on the list, but I'm trying to remember why, if it's a position, if it's a new position.
It's an existing position.
It's
This
an
is just
existing
converting
position.
it from an 80% part-time to 100% full-time.
Got it. So the 23,000 represents the difference between 80% part-time and full-time.
Yeah.
Got it. So,
And that's the one that's encumbered.
yeah,
That someone's
right.
in that position.
Yeah, someone's in that position. So it's basically a raise. It's a conversion to full-time and a raise.
And, well, yes, and expectation that she'll be working.
Doing more.
More work, too. but
Got it.
yeah.
Okay. All right. So I'm fine with that. I just want to make sure I understood that. But yeah, I'm fine with putting them all three together since they're all related as one item.
Great.
And then I would just recommend, then the mapping, segregation, and the burial sites would just be on their own as individual items.
Exactly.
As tier 2.
Yeah, exactly. And I would, my suggestion, because we're going to have to prioritize somewhere, and I'd like to go full-throated support of the planning requests, I would suggest mapping segregation phase 2, burial sites, and then I would add in the countywide planning Planner 4 climate initiatives. And those would be the 3 items that I would include on the new and enhanced programs list. And unless there is great deal of heartburn from the department, I think that would make our strongest case to get these funded by colleagues. But let me hear from you, and then I'll turn it to colleagues to see what their thoughts are. Just for your general thoughts on if we took that approach and what concerns you might have.
Okay, so I want to make sure I understand what we've talked about is taking those top 3 positions, the regulatory and positions, they're going to be part of the tier 1 of the new and enhanced, right?
Correct.
To get together, yeah. And then beyond that, you were suggesting mapping segregation, then burial sites, and then the countywide Planner 4?
As separate items
Within that
to
same
be
tier.
decided by colleagues individually.
Okay, yeah.
As a tier, as a second tier. They'd be
Second-
like in parentheses tier 2, just like we did previously
Okay,
on
so.
the park side.
Yeah, so the case that I would make for the climate initiatives one is, if you'll recall, I think it was Bill 3-22 requires us now to do climate assessments for every single master plan, climate assessment for every single ZTA. We've been doing the ZTA since March 1st of last year, and I think over the course of this year, we've had 4 different people that have worked on those. We're pulling people from each of our area teams, environmental planners, who aren't necessarily experts on the climate. And so from a consistency perspective, this person would be the person responsible for producing those. On the master plan side, the concern here, and we're hearing it from the community, is that we're not getting these out quick enough. Where people want to be able to see the climate assessment while we're reviewing the plan. We do them afterwards. It's almost like it is an assessment after the fact. What we'd rather see, and I think what the community would rather see, is that we're doing those assessments along with the plan so that the recommendations, ideas that are coming from the climate specialist on this are informing the recommendations that are in our plan. And so that could all be delivered kind of more concurrently with the plan. And so that would, this person would be responsible for that. I will say, I think when this bill went through, there was a question that was asked at the planning department, do you think you need staff to help with this? And our response was at the time, a few years back, we're going to see how this goes. Well, we've been seeing how it goes, and I could tell you, I think we would really benefit from having that person. The other thing is just tying it back to Thrive. One of the 3 pillars of Thrive is environmental resilience, and a big part of that is our response and our resiliency to climate change. And so this person would not just be the climate assessment person, but would also be the person who would lead all of our resilience efforts. So, and collaborate with other county agencies, would be our point person on the climate action plan. And so we feel like Thrive calls for this to be one of the main things that we're focused on, and it would behoove us to have someone in that position and also just help us with being able to put these assessments out. So I would prefer to see that one higher up on the list.
Sure. Okay. Councilmember Fanny Gonzalez.
I agree. I mean, you got to walk the talk. We passed Thrive, the climate plan that you mentioned. We talk, I was in Earth Day. I had like 5 events on Earth Day. That was like 2 days ago. And all we talked about was how amazing Montgomery County is on environmental issues and that we're at the forefront nationwide. And this is walking the talk. I think our colleagues who agreed to, honestly, and I do think it should actually be part of Tier 1. So that's my take.
Okay. Councilor Joanno, any comments?
It can't be part Tier 1.
Yeah,
Set
we combine those out. Yeah.
Yeah, the other two.
So that's why I'm reflecting what both of you are saying by saying that this is really, really important, and I want to elevate it up, focus on these three items. They deal with two of the most important issues that we are addressing, grappling with our past and, being honest about our past and the planning department's role in helping us to do that, which is critical, and our environmental and climate initiatives, making sure that we're sustaining for the future. So to your point. So that would be my suggestion. Everything else is important too, but I think we do have to prioritize here. And, again, the goal is to put the best foot forward. So that is the reason why I am proposing this the way that I am, and why I hope that we can come to some level of consensus on it. Councilmember Joanno?
Yeah, I'm fine with moving, as I understand it, moving that one up into Tier 2 and then having all three stand alone.
Exactly.
That's fine.
Exactly. And then the other ones we will not be including on the new and enhanced program list.
Correct.
Could I make one request? It's just if that mapping segregation and the burial sites don't make it out of reconciliation, they're not part of the budget, then could we still add them to our work program to the extent that we can start working on these in-house? I mean, we can't do that burial sites. We would need 5 archaeologists to be able to complete it in a year. So, but we can get it started. It can be recognized on our work program. It'll have an extended, ideally, we get the funding and we're able to move forward with it.
Do whatever you want with the money you have, but yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Part of it is that if we find alternative sources of funding, we'd like to be able to use that for something. If it's in our work program, it's easier for us to move forward with that.
If with the agreement of colleagues, if you need, we'll see where we go. We're going to fight to try to get you funding for that, because it's something that's important to all of us here, and we talked about it and have talked about it. If it comes to that and you feel like you need some authority from us, a memo, something, because it wasn't funded, if you feel like that was not directing you to do it, since not part of your work program, et cetera. Certainly not what you're hearing from colleagues, but we're happy to put that in writing and send it over. We'll put it on letterhead to reflect the will of the committee, that moving forward to the extent that you can, with the resources that you have, we certainly would support that. And there's agreement there. Ms. Dunn?
Yeah, I'll just note that in the past, we have added things like this to the work program. We just put an asterisk next to it, and at the very bottom, we'll note that it was an unfunded but work program item, so that it's clearly on the work program. It's noted that it's not funded, but it doesn't mean that if there is some supplemental amount of money that comes
it would
through,
delay
then
some of
get
what
it.
you are doing, but it would allow you to at least get started. Happy to do that. I think we can, cross that bridge when we get there, but I think for now, just let staff be aware that this, the committee and the council is supportive. It's just a question of funding and resources. Committee members agree? Okay. I think we have satisfied this item. Everybody in full understanding of the decision point? The unanimity that we are operating with?
We're getting there. Okay, we are on Central Administrative Services now. The FY25 Montgomery County portion of the proposed CAS budget before chargebacks is $12.9 million. It's an increase of $1.7 million, or 15.3% over the FY24 adjusted adopted budget. And you'll see if you turn, now unfortunately now I have no page numbers on my staff report. They dropped off, but page 25, you'll see the different departments of the Central Administrative Services budget broken out by what was approved in 24, what's requested in 25, and the change. As you know, the Prince George's and Montgomery County Councils meet to agree on any changes to the CAS budget. And if they do not agree, then the Commission's budget stands as submitted. The bi-county meeting will occur on May 9th this year, before the Council has completed its review of all the other departments and agencies. Consequently, that means that the CAS portion of the M-NCPPC budget cannot be changed after May 9th. The good news is that the full Council will be taking up the Commission's budget before this, and so this shouldn't be a problem. To meet the CE recommended budget, CAS's share of reductions to the M-NCPPC This requested budget is $845,873, and CAS has identified 2 tiers of non-recommended reductions and a 3rd tier of offered savings. You can see those starting on the bottom of page 25 and then at the top of page 26. And what council staff will note is that 4 of 6 items on the Tier 1 reductions for CAS are annualized increases for FY24 approved staffing. The other 2 are delays in hiring of new positions, although you did have, I believe the chair mentioned some state requirements related to those that council staff is not aware of, so we'll turn it to whoever in a minute to talk to that. But without that information, council staff had suggested that the annualizations that were in the Tier 1 actually be restored, and then the remainder of what needs to be made up to meet the county executive's budget could just be funding in a tranche that is either broken up into 2 tiers or 1 tier. And so I'll leave that to the committee to talk about.
Why don't we turn it back over to the chair to describe what you were mentioning before, and you can turn it over to colleagues
I'd
and
like
Central
to turn
Administrative
it over
Services as
to
needed.
Bill Spencer, the acting executive director, to talk about the 2 positions that we would like restored to Tier 1.
Okay, I'd be glad to. I'm Bill Spencer, acting executive director, serving on behalf of Asantha Chang Smith, who couldn't be here. I'm really, these 2 positions really excite me, and I will tell you why. It's because it's a core value of mine, and that goes to social justice, social equity. The one position that we requested was the chief diversity, supply diversity position. They mentioned that that's a state mandate, that we have a supplier diversity program. Of course, it's necessary that we have someone to run it who has expertise. What this position will be doing is adding to the social fabric and equity, economic vitality of the region, of this organization. We spent, or the Montgomery County Department spent $48 million in procurements last year. $18 million of that was with vendors located in Montgomery County. Of that, $14 million was MFD. Okay? So, right now, I believe there's a capacity to reach out into the communities, because we have small businesses and we have people who are coming into this organization or coming into the county who are speaking different languages, who are wanting to add to the economic vitality of this region and add to the fabric and diversity and add something to this that we aren't reaching out to, okay? And I believe that we need a coordinated approach to reach out and make our system easier and have someone be able to walk them through the procurement process, walk them through, show them how to, what's necessary, and make it easier for small businesses, for new immigrants into the county to be able to start their businesses. That's what makes this county great. That's what makes it interesting, and that's what makes it fun to be a county resident. When you can come and not have a cookie or one of these big box stores, or a restaurant that's a cookie that's a big box restaurant that's replicated over and over but is diverse. That's what adds to the fabric. That's what makes it interesting. That's what makes the arts and entertainment district, hopefully in the future, a place where everybody will want to go, and we'll be driving our buses and our vehicles and our cars and everything else to up and down Georgia Avenue. That's my passion. That's why we need a position like this.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Fani Gonzalez.
I remember when I was on the planning board, and I had this big discussion with our friends from HR, and talking about this very issue, because there was an equity situation where all these contracts were not going to people of color. So I'm glad that the commission is moving forward on this. And I remember my friend, Prince George's County Planning Board Commissioner Manny, who was my sidekick on this thing. And so I'm glad to see that this is being recognized in a big focus on companies that are in equity areas to be rewarded these contracts, especially when we reward contracts to folks in equity areas. The money stays in the county, right? Be it Montgomery or Prince George's County. So I think it's a great thing to move forward. I felt like I had to say that just because we had long meetings on this issue right before I left. Yes, that's it. And I do support this. So.
Okay, Councilmember Toronto, any comments?
No, just if Ms. Dunn, maybe just understanding what's I just want to make sure I understand, because we've been using restoration. This is my first time, and I think I understand restoration to mean it's not on the list.
Restoration, right, means that
Yeah.
we are going to request this as part of the base budget. Right.
Right. And so what's the proposal here then exactly? And
So,
how much?
Right, for council staff, it was the annualization of all those FY24 approved positions, which totaled about $400,000.
This is like 25, the bottom of 20, like
The bottom of 26, if you look at, or
26.
you could look at the bottom of 25, it's there as well.
Okay.
It's basically, yeah, if you looked at 25, it's those first four items, it's around $400,000. The next two are delays in hiring, but it also means that this committee would be approving new positions. But if they are state mandated, if they are required positions, that's a wrinkle to something that's needed. Although the program is needed, I don't know, again, they made the decision that meant that
Yeah, I think
position
that's
is
the,
needed.
I mean, I think annualization increases is consistent with what other
Right.
committees have done, just to be clear.
Yeah,
I think
I
Councilmember
agree with
Joanna's point,
About the
would we or would we not be in compliance with state law if the position were ultimately not funded?
I'm guessing you asking me the question.
Sure.
So,
Well, I
okay.
think you're the best person to answer it, so I yield to you on who you think is the best person, but I think you are.
In effect, that we would not be able to have a program, someone with expertise in the areas of procurement, and also that focus in the areas that we needed, the small businesses, and all those other factors that preclude and present hidden barriers to people enjoying what everyone else is enjoying because of their size, because of some of the barriers that they encounter, the social barriers that they encounter. I think if we didn't fund the position, we shouldn't have the program, which is mandated. And so I don't think we can be successful without the position. We can't be.
Right. Okay, and then that would be related to the items. What's the dollar amounts associated with that?
I don't know, we'll have to check, but before we get there, I just think you should, one question I have is there a date by which you must comply?
That's a good question.
I was
Well,
going to ask that.
well,
I'd ask that.
we're waiting for the state to do its disparity impact study, which is going to be released.
We're waiting
and,
on ours too in the
submit-
county.
Pardon me?
We're waiting on
Yes.
ours too.
And so that's September. This September this year, we knew it was coming. We need to gear up and stand up the program. And so that we can look and see and have an idea. I just want to be frank with you. It's not rocket science to know that there are certain segments of the population that's been left behind. And so this will tell us what the disparity is, what's the impact, and then what direction and how and how we're going to address this strategically.
Yeah, I mean, the real reason for the disparity study is that it's legally required in order to have
Yes.
a preferential program, which frankly are under assault at the
Yeah.
federal judiciary level at the Supreme Court. And so, we're proud of our preferential programs. We think it's an important tool, something that we would hope to continue. And by the way, what aren't under assault are the other preferential programs, particularly in higher ed. And Councilmember Joanna and I have both, in different ways, done higher ed work. Legacy is a preferential program. Early decision is a preferential program. There are a lot of preferential programs that aren't under assault, but that's a conversation for a different day that I know we all share. But that's the reason for the disparity. So just to be clear, it is the legal framework that allows us to move forward to do this.
Right.
So if the state is if the state is going to finish their disparity study in September, what is the expectation under the state requirement of when your program would be up and running?
Well, we're wanting to get it up now, or preparation for getting it up now. Soon as we have the study in our hands, then that again will tell us how the level, the magnitude of the disparity, okay, and where we need to go out and do our outreach, the approach, and what's necessary to reach everyone that's been left out of this.
Yeah, I appreciate. We're trying to hone. I just want to be clear. We understand your interest in this position. I think there's generally shared interests here. What we're trying to hone in on, we are separating very significantly the want to do's with the required to do's.
Okay.
And we're trying to understand, and if you could just help us understand, if we need to figure this out offline and come back to it or agree.
Is the question
conditional? The question is, at what point is the state requirement that this program is up and running, that you're saying that this position is needed to fulfill?
It's now. We need to fulfill that now.
So
you're out of compliance currently with state law. I just want to make. I'm just trying to. We're trying to make our decision with the best information that we have. It's not for lack of interest in this. It's for being consistent with the approach that we're taking with all positions, because we have a lot of priorities.
So, Chair Friesen, are you asking, if the studies come out in September, when would you have to have a person in place? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, at what point are you in compliance and not in compliance with state law?
I have Deborah Gordon, our General Counsel.
General Counsel.
I just want to note also for the committee, the amount, because you'd asked that and I found it. So the Supplier Diversity Inclusion Chief, the total salary is $178,940.
And so that would be the proposal.
Which would be split between the two counties, though.
Right, so we'd be half of that, and that's what would be going into the base budget if this decision is
Ongoing, right?
ongoing way. So yeah, that's why. Okay, yes, Ms. Borden.
Deborah Borden, for the record, General Counsel for the Commission. I wouldn't say we were out of compliance. What I would say is that this General Assembly legislation came through in 2019. And it has taken us this long to get here. So we were told in 2019, legislatively, Commission, you must do this. But doing a disparity study takes time, it's expensive, and it has taken us several years to get, like I said, to this point. We have been in contact with our delegation members. They understand that we have been working diligently to get here. We've also, in the meantime, stood up a local supplier diversity program, which you don't need a disparity study for. So we've done that, and we're just waiting on this.
On the basis of geography as opposed to race.
Exactly. So we already have one person on staff who's been dealing with that program, and we've gotten great results from that program already. But now we need another person. Just to give you an idea, generally a supplier diversity office that handles this kind of program for, say, either county, Prince George's County, Montgomery County, you're talking about 10 people. At the moment, we've got one person working on the local supplier diversity program, and we're asking to add another person to stand up our new program, which, by the way, we need to write regs for. We need regulations, we need procedures, we need everything. We're starting from scratch. And so we need the study first to tell us how to write the regulations, tell us what we need to target, how we need to target that, and what our parameters are. Then we need to write the regs, and then we need to get started. And we need somebody to help us do that.
All right, so it's a split position, 50%. It is a state requirement. I agree with that. You can't really follow through in fidelity the state requirement without a position to do it. I appreciate that. Is it 75% of the position in the first year because they'd start somewhere around September when the disparity study finishes?
Well, I think if we get the position, we want to start that person as soon as possible because there's a lot of prep work that we would like the position to come in July if we can get it, and then do the prep work, be ready to go when the disparity study comes in. If we bring somebody in, from outside, they've got to at least get to know the commission. The commission is a unicorn. It is not a normal sort of executive agency. We are set up differently. They've got to come in, get acclimated, and then we've got to get them hitting the ground running as soon as that disparity study comes in. People are watching us. We've got eyes on us. They expect us to get this done, and we've had quite a grace period. So, it's not that we're out of compliance, it's that we have expectations to meet, and we need to get it done.
So a month from now, you're not really going to know what the final budget is for the counties until about a month from now. How long do you expect it's going to take to put together your solicitation and then ultimately put it out there to recruit, to bring somebody in, to make a decision? Because I imagine that's not going to be able to happen on July 1st.
Well, if
I
they
have
give it
great
to me, I
respect
can
for
do
Mr.
it.
Spencer and his HR capabilities,
We
but
can make it happen, yeah.
Yeah.
July 1, I can guarantee you we'll have someone.
you can guarantee us that you can have somebody on July
I
1.
can guarantee you that at least by July 2, we'll have someone.
Okay, I'll yield, Councilmember Jawando, I'll yield back to you.
No, I appreciate the questions and thank you for the information. It's an unfunded state mandate, by the way, of which there are many, and care about the issue a lot. Councilmember Sales and I authored the bill to do our own disparity study for county procurement, for county government procurement. So appreciate your passion for the issue. This is just about making sure we're guarding this budget and putting things forward that in a way that's transparent and consistent with what we've done before. So I think we can, if the state says we have to do it, I'm fine. I'm skeptical that we're going to have the position off by July 1, despite the assurance. And I would feel more comfortable giving the full amount if it was on a list somewhere, not baked into the base budget.
And just to be clear, it's not going to be baked into the base budget in the sense that we have to negotiate with Prince George's County.
Sure.
And ultimately, this is really treated separately from that list every year because it is
That's
a
true.
negotiation
That's true.
no matter what. And then ultimately, we have to abide by the ultimate agreement that we make with Prince George's County, which is really treated
That's gonna decide it.
separately. So this is our signal to where the negotiation begins, but ultimately we have to come up with an agreement because we can't fund a certain part of this position without Prince George's and vice versa.
If my budget director just informed me that if we had to, we could delay but for 2 months if that it would help, but we can make it happen even sooner.
You have a wise person next to you.
Yes.
Well, let's delay it by 2 months.
Let's lapse it 2 months. I think that's realistic. That way you have extra time to find the perfect candidate for this critical work, which we all are pulling for, and we're not going to ask you to send a memo to us on July 2nd with the name and CV of the incumbent in the position who started yesterday. Yeah, exactly. So now you have a little bit of time. Okay, so 50% and 2 months lapse. Agreed on that? Okay, great.
Then other position,
Okay, the other positions is the ADA coordinator. And everyone here, I'm sure, is familiar with the Americans with Disabilities Act. And under Title II, it requires that we have, and it's federally mandated, that we have an ADA coordinator. Now, we have ADA representatives and folks that are doing great work in the departments. It's not that work is not being done, but it's not being coordinated. It's not, we don't have a consistent plan across the commission, for the commission. Everyone is kind of doing their thing out there and making accommodations work, making all the things that they need to work, but it's not a coherent plan. There's not. We need to have someone in charge, like the Americans with Disabilities Act requires, a coordinator who can speak to the public and convey to the public and speak to the public about their concerns, to have an overarching review in terms of consistency of review and implementation of a transition plan. That is, how are we going to identify the gaps in services and programs, and how we're going to get from point A to point B, and how long it's going to take us, and have a vision in ensuring that we remain on track. And when people have issues, where do they go? Do they go to this one, that one? It becomes confusing when you have multiple points. So you're going to want someone who can deal with these centrally, deal with the issues internally, because you have to worry about how you accommodate your employees. You have to worry about not only your structural issues regarding ADA, but your programmatic, as well as your virtual. Okay, you have to have someone, not just a part-time person or someone with a kind of an idea, but deep knowledge about how to address the 5 titles for the Americans with Disabilities Act, and someone who knows how to implement, who knows, who has put together a transition plan before, who knows what it takes to get from there to here, and knows what some of the requirements are on the Americans with Disabilities Act architectural guidelines, who knows those terms and knows what it means. Right now, at this point, the executive director kind of fills in, but she's not an expert in that area. You know, she just kind of like has the title, and that is not a. I'm not talking badly about my boss, because I respect my boss and I look up to my boss. But she's formulating a vision, an overarching vision for the organization. Okay, that's not her forte. To lead the Americans with Disabilities Act, we need a specialist. We need an expert, a subject matter expert in the area. The departments, okay, has asked for this position. They know the challenges. We didn't say we're going to do this. They asked us. We need that type of leadership. We need a type of coordination. Can you help us? And we're stepping forward to help our organization provide the kind of services and make sure that you have the kind of vision that include all of the people that you represent,
So,
all the communities, yes.
excuse me, so I don't know, maybe it'll take time. If you have any questions or comments about this position.
Yeah, so the idea here is, this isn't required, this position isn't required under federal law. ADA is required under federal law, and you would like this position to better provide services to the departments to comply with ADA. That's what it sounds like to me. I just want to make sure.
I want to
That's
say
different than the prior one where you feel like you couldn't do the work.
ADA is having an ADA coordinator is required by the federal law.
Right, but the executive director could be the ADA coordinator as it has currently been, or else you wouldn't be in compliance with federal law, and I don't think you're suggesting that.
I would say that we're getting 80. It's not effective. It's just not effective. for the executive director to be the ADA coordinator because that's not her subject matter expertise. It's just not.
Okay, well, I appreciate that. I definitely think that's an enhancement to service. It's an important enhancement, but it seems like an enhancement to service, and it sounds like colleagues agree with me on that. So we'll treat that differently as a new and enhanced position, just to be consistent with how we've approached the other issues. We'll put it on, but it'll be a new and enhanced program and position.
And so one clarification, I understood that the annualizations will go on as be restored, since they really are about funding
Yes.
previously approved positions. And this new supplier diversity chief lapsed 2 months. The Montgomery County portion will also be noted as restored. Is that correct? Okay, good.
Yes.
So the restoration list will have 5 items, Greg, and then the tier 1 will be the ADA coordinator, half-time, whatever the percentage that our share is of that person. That'll be
Lapsed 2 months. Lapsed 2 months and
Okay.
50%. No, I think ADA, we should, I mean, it was suggested, the suggestion in a way to find, I mean, it would be the same thing, the timing of being able to bring somebody on. So my view would be, if we're going to do it, it's the same idea. If you started the recruitment in July, it's going to take some time to put it out, get somebody, do interviews, bring somebody in, hire them. So, okay, great. All right.
All right, with that, you have special revenue funds. Again, they're part of what gets appropriated as part of the operating budget. So we don't tend to go into detailed review of these. We typically never change anything related to them, but they are always presented to the committee and to the full council, so you know when you are not only approving what you're funding with your tax-supported money, but you're knowing what's being appropriated for the commission. Those are located at the end of the staff report, right before the section on racial equity and social justice considerations. If you have any questions on them, I'm happy to answer them. I'm sure the commission is as well. But staff has no changes recommended for that.
I don't see any questions or comments from colleagues. Let's continue.
Great. And so with that, the last section of this staff report has to do with racial equity and social justice. And we've asked the Parks Department, the Planning Department, CS, to provide us with their approach to the budget that takes in racial equity and social justice considerations and how they incorporate that in their budget process. And you'll see those on the last 3 pages of the staff report. And it's an important component that they provide to us and that they do, and is not part of the mandate that comes through with the Racial Equity Office and the scoring that you've seen from the departments.
Yeah, I don't want to harp on it too long, but I didn't want to overlook it either. I think it's really important. In the packet is included responses to these issues, and just wanted to acknowledge the significant work that the Planning Department and the Parks Department have been doing on this front, and that the Commissioner's Office have been doing as well. It's a shared commitment, and it's particularly important for parks that are for everybody, and for planning that, frankly, is central to many of the issues that we talk about as we address racial equity and social justice. Great. Okay. Well, before we close, I have a proposal. Speaking of the commitment on racial equity and social justice, this is very important. This has been an ongoing conversation, not just between me and the department, but really between this committee and the department, and among the whole council and this department. And in advancing our racial equity and social justice goals and commitments, and making sure that it is central to the work that is done. And there is arguably no area that has greater impact with residents on a regular basis than the decisions that we make in planning, in land use, in housing, and many of the issues that the Planning Department takes up. So in consultation with Director Sartori, who I want to just acknowledge and give an opportunity to follow me and explain in more detail, this is really the department's proposal that I am presenting and moving forward to colleagues in hopes that we can advance this together. But it is really the vision that he has come to his new position with, as a way to really uplift these issues and ensure that they are centralized as part of the process, like we are beginning to do at the county council, like we are beginning to do in county government. And so I just want to thank and acknowledge him. There's two aspects to the proposal. One is an equity chief position. This would be a senior level position in the director's office to specifically look at equity as part of planning across the entire enterprise and make sure that it is central to the work, understanding equity as part of training, advancing best practices, and promoting accountability to follow through with equity and to ensure that it is elevated at the highest levels of the department. That position for FY25 would require $118,839. I can have Director Sartori explain in more detail. And then the second piece, which is very much related to this effort, and this was part of the discussion of the recently concluded development review work group, and this was the discussion of a planning academy. And this was something that planning had put forward as a suggestion of a way to advance those goals. And the idea was to create a planning academy to reach historically underrepresented and historically disenfranchised individuals and communities in our very diverse county, a third of whom are foreign born, and who are frequently underrepresented significantly in zoning, planning, and permitting procedures and hearings, and to really make sure that we have an accessible, culturally competent way to do the outreach and the education that's needed. Not just when a master plan is happening in a community where we're taking intentional efforts as the planning department has to knock on doors. Councilmember Jawanda joined recently with everyday canvassing, for instance, in Tacoma Park as an example. Similarly in Fairland, Briggs, Cheney, and in other master plans. I know Councilmember Fonnie Gonzalez has done this in a number of master plans, including in Forest Glen and other places. This would institutionalize it as part of a broader effort of the planning process in general, not just the specific once every 20 or 30 year master plan process. To be clear, that would be $199,700 in requested funds for FY25. And this really is to align the Park and Planning Commission on the Montgomery County side, and specifically the Planning Department, with our Racial Equity and Social Justice Act, and in continuing with the significant and important work that this committee has been advocating for and that the council has been advocating for. So let me turn it to Director Sartori to add anything that I have left out and to share his vision for these two new initiatives and why he believes it is so important, and then we can turn to colleagues for their questions, feedback, and comments.
Sure, thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity to be able to consider this at this point in the process here. I want to just emphasize first off that equity is something that every single person in our department needs to be focused on. What the purpose of this equity chief role is to provide that structure and guidance and kind of the strategy to how we integrate that in all of the work that we do. So we do have our equity agenda for planning. The point that this person would be the point person on coordinating that and ensuring that it is not just a collection of projects that we're working on that are related to equity in some way, but rather something that is an agenda. And you could see how the pieces kind of point us in a direction of policy that is anti-racist in nature and that are focused on the equity issues that we need to be addressing, not just we're doing it for the sake of doing them, and not to say that we are now. It's just someone who would be kind of coordinating all that effort for us. They would also oversee our internal equity peer review group. This is a group of our own staff that reviews every single project that we work on at various stages of that project, to provide recommendations and guidance on how equity can be incorporated into, and social justice can be incorporated into that project. The point here is that this person would be ensuring that the people who sit on that committee are well equipped to make the recommendations that they're making, that they've got the training and support and resources that they need to be able to be that assistance to us. And then consult and advise us internally on other things, our engagement efforts, our equitable engagement guide, kind of really being the champion of that with our communications team, consult on research efforts with our research and strategic projects team, and then also working with our management services team on our own recruitment and hiring practices. On the other side, the Planning Academy, this was something that did come out. It was unanimously supported out of the development review process work group. But I do want to kind of just go back a little bit to, I don't know how much you know about my history, but I spent 15 years working with the National Center for Smart Growth at the University of Maryland, and a major emphasis of that being an academic institution is education. And so this is something that I'm really kind of amped up about. I think this is a great opportunity for us to empower community members, not only with increased knowledge about what it is we do collectively, you, the council, and us, and other county agencies, DPS, and the permitting process, understanding all of that. And we would work collaboratively with all of them, but also empowering them with the ability to participate in the process. So it's not just that they learn about what the development or zoning or master plan process looks like, but how can you participate and have an impact on it? And so that is just, I think the council president really kind of summarized it really well. We would appreciate, your consideration of this, and I think it fits well with the theme of, I mentioned before about the climate specialists being, with environmental resilience being one of the pillars of Thrive. We also have racial equity and social justice as another pillar of Thrive, and so this would ensure that we have the capacity to be able to carry this out across our entire department.
Great, thank you for that. Let me turn it over to colleagues. Councilmember Drawanda.
Yeah, thank you, and I appreciate, we've discussed this before, and that you were working on an idea in also the Planning Academy and the Equitable Engagement Guide, and I think, not bury the lead, I think it's a good idea. It's a great idea. One of the things, and I appreciate you starting saying, equity is a focus of everybody and has to be embedded, and I want to make sure that we emphasize, I've seen in the past where an office is set up and a person is kind of isolated. I know that's not your intention, but it takes work to make sure that doesn't happen, particularly when it's one person with an agenda and everyone else is trying to get the work done. And so I'm happy to be a thought partner with you on that. I think, we all know we're in a, the position Chief Equity Officer exploded in 2020 after, we went through everything we went through with COVID and with the murders of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and others, and now there's obviously an attack on diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. Thankfully, in Montgomery County, we have not rolled back our commitment, and we see it as core function. But I think it makes it just even more important to work really hard, because obviously this will be one position, and there's no proposal for a staff or anything, and we've dealt with that in the county government with creating the Office of Racial Equity and Social Justice, having to build on staff to support capacity building and working with all the people within the department. So I think it's a great idea, and I think it emphasizes the commitment that you all already have. But I think you'll have to be continually vigilant in making sure that we embed this person and those those peer teams and everything else that you're doing, so that it's not just one person checking, let me send this to the equity officer to check it off. It's, and I know that's not your intention, but when we're busy, it can turn into that. So I look forward to working with you. I think this is a great idea. I think the Planning Academy, that's on the position, the Planning Academy is an awesome idea. I know that came out of the group. One of the things we ran into with Thrive when we did our efforts on, and I know you ran into this too, was, people don't understand. They just tell you what they want to see in their community. They don't understand the ins and outs. And the people who do understand are able to use the process to their advantage in a great way to design or stop or delay things that they do or don't want to see. And so I do think that will be important. But again, we have to make sure we get people in there, the right people teaching, about what's happening, the history of how we got where we are. So all that's connected. And I know you get that, but I just want to say it because I think it's just really important. So glad you brought this forward.
Thank you, Councilmember Joanno. It goes without saying, but it needs to be said. So I appreciate you noting that and all the work that has gone into this, and proud to be the person to bring it forward, but really it's not my work. Just have tried to acknowledge that and appreciate that, but really do appreciate that. And I will note, as part of this conversation, because I think it's important to what you were just discussing, there were conversations about, does it really need to be the senior level of a position? Like, would it be easier to get this through this year to start if we made it a little bit more modest? And to Director Sartori's credit, he said, I really don't think we can do it the right way unless we do it this way. And, it's going to make it a little harder, to be honest, to get it through. But, I give credit because I think it speaks to the heart of the concern that you had, and I think it's a concern that Director Sartori shared with me, is you don't want this to be a position that's off somewhere, not in the director's office, not with the level of seniority and gravitas within the organization to actually move the needle and to actually make things happen, to actually have the buy-in from everybody in the organization, from the most junior to the most senior member. So I just, he probably wouldn't say that those conversations had happened, but I think it's important to uplift that, because I think it speaks to the commitment that you were raising and that you shared, that that he has, that I also know that he and the department has. And I think that also goes for the chair. I think it also goes for the Parks Department as well, and the entire commission. So I just want to share that as well. Councilmember Fontaine Gonzalez.
I think Councilmember Joando said it beautifully, and I second. That's
okay. Ditto, ditto, ditto. All right. So we're, let me turn it to Director Sartori, and then we will vote on this to share any final comments and to make sure that you clarify and get what you need.
Sure. Yeah, it was just, and one question you had was just the clarification, if needed, on the salary for the position. That includes an expected 4-month lapse. We'd be happy to fill the position sooner. So if you're so inclined to not do the 4-month lapse, we can cut that. But that 118 or almost 119 is with the 4-month lapse.
Yeah. So the point here too is the annualization will be more, understandably, but 4 months gives you some time to be intentional, to do planning, to make sure that you're doing the right type of outreach for the position. Right, this position is going to help you do that in general, but making sure you get the right person in too. It takes some intentionality, as well, not just putting up an online notice in 1 or 2 places. So, okay. Any further questions? So, what would be the annualized amount?
Right. That's the 178,259.
You got it? Okay. 178 is the annualized amount. So what would be put on the new and enhanced programs list would be the 118,839, which is one FTE position. That will note that it's actually it's a percentage of a position, 0.75, and then 199,700 for the Planning Academy.
Sounds good.
Okay.
And I just wanted to ask where these are to be located on the list. Tier 1, Tier 2. They don't stand alone. I mean, they're.
I think they should be put as Tier 2 standalone items. I think they're going to get a lot of support, but I want to be respectful of the department and not have people overlook their other positions thinking that they're giving them something here, since this is really a shared commitment for all of us, but I'll defer to the department.
I want all the positions on Tier 1, but if you're confident that you're going to be getting to Tier 2, I mean, we'll see how this process plays out. I want to make sure that it's not going to be we only got to Tier 1 and that's it. So if Tier 2 seems like this will be considered, then sure, with the others that we have there. The other one is the climate.
I mean, I would just say, whether we like it or not, it's going to compete with the other positions that you have there. So if you put it Tier 2, it's not going to be at that same level. Just,
Right.
you know.
So what we have in Tier 1 is the three positions, and I'd like to keep those
That are
at
bunched,
Tier 1
yeah.
that are bunched
Yeah.
together, yeah. And Tier 2, we've got mapping, segregation, burial sites, the climate initiatives position, and then it would be this position, and the planning academy.
Yeah, all listed separately.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think we should list, I mean, we're listing these separately. I mean, you don't need the Planning Academy in order to, I mean, we want them both, but they'll be listed separately. It's not like one can't happen without the other. They're complementary initiatives. I'm going to fight very hard, I think all of us will, to get them both on. I'll also note, this is, assuming there's support for these positions, just because it's listed in a different tier doesn't necessarily mean that it will be reflected that way based on the priorities of colleagues and council members. So just want to note that as well. Okay?
I had one other correction to something I mentioned earlier, unrelated to this current conversation. There was one additional delay. It has no impact on, I think, but the University Boulevard corridor, where we are with that in terms of our preliminary recommendations, we've decided we want to go back out into the community, do a little bit more outreach on those, and so we're going to take a little bit more time on that, and so we're planning to bring that to the board in the fall, and it would be delivered then to the council in the winter, this coming winter.
Got it. Okay. But no impact on prior decisions, but you just want to correct that for the record.
Yeah.
Great. I don't think there's ever a penalty for going back and doing more community engagement. So appreciate your work and commitment to that. And thank you to colleagues. I think this is a really thoughtful discussion. We ultimately got to unanimity. It took some time, and we really fleshed things out, I think, in a really helpful way. Thank you to Ms. Dunn for all of your really important and helpful work. Thank you to the Parks Department, the Planning Department, the Chair and the Planning Board, to our Commission Office and Central Administrative Services. Thank you to OMB and the Executive Branch for your work. And with that, we are now adjourned.